Chapter 657. The players of Depth of Water already knew that the guild leader had invited someone back to teach them some PvP stuff. Why did they say again? Because not long ago, Broken Arrow had joined the guild and taught everyone a lot of things about jungle warfare. It was obvious that this wasn't something that ordinary military enthusiasts could know, because the actual combat value was too great. However, Broken Arrow had left the guild, and the guild still hadn't fully figured out the reason. Those who had added Broken Arrow as a friend wanted to ask, but found that he had already rejected their messages and wasn't contacting them at all. This matter passed silently, but this time, Depth of Water had invited another teacher. Qianli was drunk. This time, it was a famous person. Everyone knew that this person had some entanglements with their guild. It seemed that the relationship between the guild leader and this person was quite good. Everyone was quite excited. Who would have thought that now that he was in front of them, the teacher would become 100 Generations Scholar? There were many legends about 100 Generations Scholar in Shady Forest City. Shady Forest City and Sunset City were close neighbors of Waterside City, and Waterside City's beach and wine fields were famous tourist attractions. Although Sunset City was also close to this large body of water, it was too far from the main city, unlike Waterside City. Secondly, it wasn't a beach but a muddy pond. Players with beautiful equipment weren't willing to fight monsters on the shore for fear of dirtying their boots. So Waterside City's beach culture was currently unique. With this point of convergence, the culture of Shady Forest City and Sunset City also had an intersection. Sunset City learned from the Shady Tree City's drinkers that their main city was a village in the dense forest. In the village, there were some lurkers who hunted for a living. The villagers of Shady Tree City also knew that there was a group of martial artists in Sunset City. They were all ruthless people who could fight 3 to 5 people. Especially their leader, 100 Live Scholar, was even more incredible. Some said that one person could fight 20 people, and some said that one person could fight 200 people. In any case, they were awesome. So although they were all 5 strongmen, their fame in different areas was different. The Book of the 100 Eras of Wisdom was really famous in the surrounding main cities. With this call from Depth of Water, the branches and leaves in the forest shook. Many heads popped out from behind the trees and under the grass. They were still wearing the camouflage that Broken Arrow taught them to wear. Even if she didn't wear it, she couldn't bear to. Although these custom-made clothes did not have any attributes, they were not cheaper than equipment. In the words of an advertisement, they were purely handmade, without any system assistance. Come, let's get to know each other. This is Teacher Aeon of Wisdom, Deepwater introduced. His Extreme Frost was also a level 6 guild with 1,000 or so players. Even though not all of them were online, there were still a few hundred players online. Even though some of them weren't in this area, how could they not rush over after hearing the news? The forest became more and more lively, surrounding Gu Fei and the others in the middle. There are too many people. How are we going to teach them? 100 Eras Classics was sweating a little. What he was teaching this time wasn't the same as the efficiency leveling method. It wasn't that easy to learn it and then teach it to the next person. This was something even more complicated than the leveling method. Deepwater also realized that this was a problem. After communicating with everyone in the guild, they finally decided to give 50 people to the Church of the 100 Generations of Scripture to train up a special force. 50 people? That's fine. 100 Eras Classics let out a long sigh. When he was teaching normally, there were exactly 50 people in a class. As for the candidates, it was up to Deepwater and the others to choose. This guy spoke in the chat as he walked through the crowd. Some of the Extreme Frost players who came out to watch had already started to leave. Clearly, they weren't prepared to learn. In the end, Deepwater brought 50 people over, and also gave 100 Eras Classics a bag of money. 200 gold per person. Here's 10,000 gold. How's that? Brother, you didn't lose outright? This is even more valuable than your efficiency leveling method. Deepwater said. Bluff, keep bluffing. Gu Fei said. Was this the same thing? The efficiency leveling method would take at most an hour. What about this? 3 weeks. Moreover, they had to make full use of their time online. Deepwater hurriedly laughed. Sir, please be merciful. We've been spending money on clothing and camouflage recently. We don't have much money on hand. Didn't you see half of them leave when we asked for tuition? Whatever. Gu Fei was too lazy to care. Even 100 Era's classics didn't have any objections. Why would he care so much? And so, 100 Era's classics led his 50 new disciples to the depths of the forest to find a place to teach. Deepwater and Lu Ke chatted with the experts for a bit before hurriedly following. Of course, the two of them wanted to learn as well. Moreover, it was a guild leader outside of the 50-people organization. It was a rare opportunity to use their power for personal gain, so they had to make good use of it. The remaining experts stared at each other. They followed Gu Fei 100 Era's classics around. Actually, there wasn't much for them to do. Seeing that there weren't any outsiders left, the group of people finally erupted and started to find things for Gu Fei to do. They all asked him to tailor-make efficiency leveling methods for them. Okay. Make, Gu Fei said. What do you want to practice? The group of people had already thought about it. They all reported their monster names. They were all level 50. Gu Fei looked at the ones without agility and said, "Why are you guys messing around? If you don't have agility, then you need a dual leveling method. It's not like I can teach it by myself. Go back to Silent Night Valley to play." Those without agility had more or less mastered the Moonlit Night City's Silent Night Valley's leveling method, but mastering it was one thing, and practicing it was another. At that time, Gu Fei had mainly taught two combinations: the warrior and mage style, and the knight and priest style. Later, after Cloud Twilight had called in a few more people, Gu Fei had added a pair of pugilist styles. When these three combinations were combined, the problem immediately appeared. Among the three combinations, there were no shadow priests, no pugilists, and only one mage, Flaming Cloak. This meant that they could only put together a warrior mage style. Players like Dao Xiangmu and Lin Mu could play as mages and priests. They could practice, but if they really wanted to level up, how would they be efficient? Leveling efficiency had nothing to do with light priests. They were fine, but unscathed in battle, Brother Yu, an unrivaled Lucky Star were at a loss. They persistently wanted Gu Fei to invent a warrior, paladin, or even a duo style for them. Gu Fei confidently spread his hands. "I'm alone. I can't even teach them, and you want me to invent them? Forget it. Go find a place to play." The few of them could only helplessly retreat. The remaining four were Sword Demon, Blackwater, Yutian Shenming and Glue. They were all from the Agility clan. After listening to them introduce the monsters they wanted to kill, Gu Fei's face darkened. For types of monsters, 2 from Main City, 2 from Cloud City, and 2 from Waterside City. They were in 4 different regions. "Are you guys going to let us live?" Gu Fei was furious. Let us live. The 4 hurriedly said, "Why don't we split up and go to the leveling area? Take the scrolls as coordinates, and then send them to Qianli. This way, we won't waste his time. We can just fly to one area at a time." Brother Yu was jealous. "Don't go too far. Teleportation scrolls aren't that common yet. If you guys really use them like train tickets, I think it won't be long before you guys run out of scrolls." Of course not. The 4's faces were glowing. They were waiting for Gu Fei to nod his head. Gu Fei helplessly waved his hand. Go. Let me be alone for a while." "Then are you going to the leveling area?" The 4 still wanted to know a definite answer. "Tomorrow. Today you guys make the coordinates and send me the scrolls. Tomorrow I'll call you guys when I go online. One by one," Gu Fei said. Okay. The 4 couldn't ask for too much and quickly dispersed. Gu Fei stood alone in the forest. He felt like his gaming life was suddenly so full that it made him want to vomit. Gu Fei didn't have the mood to continue playing. He left the forest and went offline. After resting for a night, he logged on the next day. For Smart was already waiting for him. When she saw Gu Fei come online, she immediately greeted him. "Cough, the scrolls are in your mailbox. Take them and fly straight away. I'll be by your side." Gu Fei sighed and went out of the resurrection point. He went to the mailbox at the city gate. For teleportation scrolls were obediently waiting inside. Gu Fei took them out and put them in his pocket. He first took a Waterside City scroll and flew. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Glue was respectfully beside him. Sigh. I already said that archers are the hardest to perform. Why are you guys so stubborn? Gu Fei shook his head. Glue didn't explain and rolled up his sleeves. I'll go lure monsters for you. What weapon do you use? Gu Fei asked. Dagger. Glue said. The dagger system was more related to agility. Archers didn't have the thief's dagger mastery and the dagger coefficient that came with the profession. Although they were a profession with high agility, they couldn't fully activate the coefficient of an advanced dagger. But at least it was better than using other weapons. Alright. Go lure monsters. Gu Fei took out a dagger. After teaching Glue for more than an hour, Gu Fei flew straight to the next island. This time it was Blackwater. He was killing monsters. When he saw Gu Fei, he hurriedly greeted him. Look, why didn't you tell me you were coming? I didn't even come to pick you up. Don't talk nonsense. Let's start. Gu Fei didn't even change his weapon. He directly picked up his sword. Another hour passed. In total, it had already been 3 hours. Gu Fei finished teaching 2 people. Then he contacted Sword Demon and Yutian Shenming. After asking for their coordinates, Gu Fei first went to Yutian Shenming. Yutian Shenming's equipment was still a grade higher than Glue's. He also had a higher level. He didn't have the problem of losing his sense of direction in a small area. His learning speed was a bit faster than Glue and Blackwater. In addition, Gu Fei was also more familiar with Cloud City. The monster he chose happened to be bullied by Gu Fei before. It was over in an hour. Okay, you practice. I'm going to Sword Demon. Gu Fei called out to Yutian Shenming, and throughout the last scroll. There was a reason why Gu Fei put Sword Demon last. Of course, it wasn't to bully Sword Demon because he was honest and wouldn't have any opinions. It was because Sword Demon was undoubtedly the one with the best character, but also the one with the worst luck. He lost equipment and lost levels. He encountered all the bad things that could happen in the game. Although he found the equipment he lost, he didn't know how much effort it would take for him to make up for the lost levels. Learning an efficient leveling method to increase his leveling speed wasn't a permanent solution. Gu Fei decided to strictly teach Sword Demon and help this guy improve his PK level. Gu Fei had long since noticed that Sword Spectre's skill level had already reached its limit based on the player's unorthodox PvP playstyle. If he wanted to improve further, he would have to upgrade his equipment in-game, or master new skills and new playstyles. If he wanted to improve his technique, he would need to improve his combat knowledge. Therefore, Gu Fei put Sword Demon last so that he could spend all his time on this guy. Gu Fei was fully prepared this time. Not only did his own people arrive, but he also saw that Coward Savior was online. After asking where he was, he sent him a message to call him over to help. After the scroll was sent over, Gu Fei saw that the Sword Ghoul was fighting monsters, and the Coward Savior was already nearby. He was looking around with shifty eyes, causing the Sword Ghoul to be wary of him. When Gu Fei appeared, he was the first to see him. He called out Master and greeted him. Sword Demon heard the voice and turned around. When he saw it was Gu Fei, he was at a loss. Don't call me Master. Gu Fei used the same question to vent his anger. The Coward's Savior quickly shrank to the side. Gu Fei introduced him to the Sword Ghoul. Well, the Coward's Savior, you haven't seen him before, right? Oh, I know. Sword Demon laughed. Although he hadn't seen this person before, he knew him. When Gu Fei first ran away from Moonlit Night City, he sent him a letter. It was this person who sent him a letter. Coward Savior received some serious guidance from Gu Fei. In addition, he was very obsessed with Kung Fu. His current level wasn't low. Ordinary people weren't his opponent at all. His level wasn't low either. He had broken through 40 and changed his profession to a fist mage. His fists whistled in the wind. Well, Sword Demon, in my opinion, your PK skills have reached a certain bottleneck. What do you think? Since it was in front of him, Gu Fei had to explain. Sword Demon was startled and quickly nodded. If you continue like this, you won't be able to improve anymore. You have to really master this area of knowledge. There are also some wrong habits that need to be corrected. Gu Fei said. Although he didn't say it clearly, how could Sword Demon not understand the meaning behind Gu Fei's words? He wanted to give him some pointers. Many people had made this request to Gu Fei, but he had never agreed. Sword Demon was a kind person. He felt that Gu Fei had difficulties, so although he was quite interested in it, he never mentioned it. However, when he saw 100 Lives of Classics giving pointers to Deepwater, he felt a little itchy in his heart. He almost went to learn without any connections. But later, he felt that he was still an outsider of the guild, so he couldn't say it. But now, Gu Fei actually took the initiative to have this intention. This really surprised him. Come. I'll give you a systematic explanation first. Coward, let's do a demonstration. Cooperate. Gu Fei said. Don't call me coward. I'm Coward Savior. Coward Savior was very dissatisfied. Gu Fei was good at everything, but this was the point. He never called him by his full name. It was too depressing. Chapter 658. Gu Fei wasn't in a hurry to start. Instead, he asked the Sword Demon. You've seen me fight monsters many times. Have you noticed the biggest difference between me and you guys? The Sword Demon thought for a moment. You've dodged all the attacks from the basic monsters. Gu Fei nodded. That's right. I hope you'll pay attention to this point first. Of course, I knew that most of the time. You didn't dodge because you calculated that the damage of that attack wouldn't affect you much. Instead, you fought with your opponent for the rest of the attack, which was more efficient and advantageous. By dodging, not only did you avoid the damage, you also avoided a great opportunity to counterattack your opponent. But from a real fighting point of view, this kind of fighting style is a tactic that will only be used when you have no other choice. But because you're playing a game, you have to replenish and recover, so you're very used to this kind of fighting style. If you really want to improve yourself, first of all, you have to say no to this kind of fighting style. Every time you fight, whether it's a person or a monster, you have to try your best to avoid taking damage. Of course, this isn't so easy to do, but the important thing is to pay attention to it from the concept, and try to do this as much as possible. Understand what I mean? Understood. The Sword Demon nodded. Okay, you take this idea with you and fight a monster first. Gu Fei said. The Sword Demon nodded and went up to kill the monster. He kept chanting dodge in his heart. With this focus, he forgot to attack and just stared at the monster's attack, hoping to dodge every attack. Even so, the Sword Demon couldn't dodge all the attacks from the level 50 monster. He was almost killed by the monster before he suddenly realized that he was focused on dodging and hadn't attacked at all. Glancing at Gu Fei, he couldn't tell whether his expression was happy or worried. The Sword Demon continued to run around while looking for opportunities to stab. However, there were many times when he had the urge to attack instead of dodging when the monster slapped him. As expected of someone with a strong willpower, the Sword Ghost managed to restrain this habit that he had developed over the years. In the end, he didn't manage to attack, but he didn't manage to dodge the slap either. With this new rule, the Sword Ghost felt his hands and feet bound. The opportunities he found to attack after circling around were disproportionate to the damage he received from the monsterling's attacks. With such a slow depletion, it was clear that the Sword Ghost could not outlast these level 50 monsterlings, which he could deal with under normal circumstances. The result was predictable, but the Sword Demon didn't change his original intention. He continued to grit his teeth and strictly followed Gu Fei's instructions. Gu Fei, who had been watching silently all this while, suddenly made his move. In just a few moves, he killed the monster that had also lost most of its HP to the Sword Ghost. The Sword Demon let out a long breath and slowly ate bread to recover his HP, while waiting for Gu Fei's lecture. Gu Fei was actually very pleased. He patted the Sword Demon and said, "That's great. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to control your body even if you wanted to change your mind after so many years. I didn't expect you to be able to restrain yourself so cleanly. You're too strong." "This is nothing." The Sword Demon didn't think much of it. Gu Fei smiled. People who could do it, of course, wouldn't think that what they were doing was difficult. Only those who couldn't do it would understand the difficulty. "But if I fight like this, I can't beat this monster," said the Sword Demon. Gu Fei nodded and said, "It will definitely be like this at the beginning. Do you know why? Because although your original playstyle isn't very desirable, At least it's a set of playstyle that has a balance between offense and defense. But now that you're asked to strengthen your dodging, you're too focused, and your offense and defense are out of balance, causing the monsters that you can deal with to become not so easy to deal with. What you have to do next is to fight with this concept and rebalance your offense and defense. There are a lot of things to pay attention to. First of all, the most difficult thing for you to do now is how to attack while dodging. Actually, think about it. I usually fight monsters or PK. I will definitely dodge the opponent's attack. But have I ever been like you? Because of dodging, I can't find a chance to attack? Dodging can't be dodging for the sake of dodging. Sometimes it will be the foreshadowing of the next attack. Sometimes it will even be a part of the attack. You're still too early to enter this stage. What you have to pay attention to now is to find a way to attack as much as possible while dodging. Even let your dodging match the attack you're about to use. Well, look at how I do it. Gu Fei said as he also took out a dagger and drew a small monster to attack. Dodging, attacking, dodging, attacking. Gu Fei seemed to be doing these things, but the sword demon didn't have Gu Fei's skills. Even if he saw it, he couldn't do it in a short time. After watching for a while, the sword demon suddenly felt more and more familiar. The coward's savior had come to the side of the sword demon and said to him, "Can you see it? In the process of fighting monsters, there are many times that the situation is exactly the same as before. The difference is that in those situations you just simply dodged, but he found a chance to attack in the process of dodging. I think this is probably what he wants you to notice. Thank you." After listening to the coward's reminder, the sword demon really understood a lot, especially in the process of fighting with the small monsters before. At this time, when the process of Gu Fei fighting with the small monsters reappeared, he clearly saw how Gu Fei counterattacked while dodging. The sword demon suddenly had the urge to try again. After the small monsters were killed by Gu Fei, the sword demon jumped out eagerly. "Let me try again." "Do you understand a little?" Gu Fei smiled. The sword demon nodded. Luring the monster, killing. As a result, it was two different things from watching. Although he had repeatedly weighed the use of Gu Fei's counterattack in several places before, when fighting with the monster, the most thought in the sword demon's mind was, "Oh, I should have done this and that with that blow just now." In the end, it was Gu Fei who dealt with the small monsters again. The sword demon was aggrieved this time. He felt like he was watching many opportunities floating in front of him, but he couldn't grasp any of them. As a result, Gu Fei was very happy. Very good, very good. As expected, once you understand this principle, your progress is very fast. Don't worry, I know that you have a force in your heart, but can't use it. This is normal. Although you already have this thought and this consciousness, after all, sometimes it still appears a little slow. In addition, your body can't keep up with this consciousness. There's no need to rush. Take your time. This kind of improvement that I told you about is definitely not something that can be achieved overnight. If you can reach my level with a few words of advice, then our skills are too worthless. This is a gradual improvement process. You may not even be aware of the progress. As long as one day you reach a certain level and suddenly look back, you will definitely find that you have made amazing progress. Yes. The sword demon nodded. Okay, this time, coward, you go and fight. Take off all your equipment and fight a little slower. Do you know how to use a dagger? Gu Fei asked. Oh no. The coward's savior was only an amateur after all. It was already not bad to be familiar with a few routines. It was impossible for a non-professional to be proficient in all kinds of martial arts. Then use your fist. Anyway, the principle is the same. Gu Fei said. Okay. The coward's savior accepted the order and began to fight the monsters. At this time, Gu Fei began to explain the coward's routines to the sword demon in detail. The sword demon listened attentively. At this time, he had long forgotten about the efficiency leveling method. The efficiency leveling method was only a means to level up. The purpose of leveling up was only to become stronger and defeat others. Fighting monsters was never a player's ultimate goal. If he could learn actual combat skills from Gu Fei, he could still achieve this goal. Gu Fei began his one-on-one devil training with the sword demon. In other places, there were also people who were busy, The 100 Years strategist treated the students of Extreme Frost as if they were students from his bodyguard school. From time to time, there would be shouts of haha coming from the dense forest of Shady City, which made people's hearts jump. The others found their own places to level up. The last group of people all went to Moonlit Night City's Silent Night Valley. Southern Azure Sword and Flaming Cloak were partners who came here to level up. Brother Yu and Unscathed in Battle couldn't find partners, so they had the idea of joining the 10 Guilds Alliance. Cloud Twilight, of course, would still give them this convenience. He chose the corresponding classes for them to work with. However, the shameless Unscathed in Battle actually asked Cloud Twilight if he could find him a beautiful woman to play with. No matter how much face Cloud Twilight gave, he didn't dare to agree to this request. There were already very few girls in his guild, and if he were to share the meat with the wolves outside, the wolves in his guild would definitely revolt. In the end, Cloud Twilight could only laugh and tell Unscathed in Battle that all the girls in his guild were taken. He really couldn't find any leftover girls. Only then did he send Unscathed in Battle away. At the same time, in the studio, Five Nights was quickly coordinating the work. Since this project involved most of the leveling areas in almost all the main cities in the game, it was impossible to rely on Five Nights' manpower alone. No matter which main city it was, of course, the local population would be the most familiar with the surrounding leveling areas. Therefore, after Five Nights reported the situation of the negotiations to the higher-ups, Inch Studio set up a special market research team. Five Nights personally led the team, and the management of the main cities cooperated fully. They came up with an accurate plan in the shortest amount of time possible. 3 days had passed since Five Nights had finished his work. He then officially notified Gu Fei and 100 Lives Jingluan. Originally, Gu Fei and the others wanted to let Southern Azure Sword handle this matter. However, after some thought, Southern Azure Sword felt that they needed professionals like Gu Fei or 100 Lives Jingluan. After all, they were the ones who had the most say in leveling efficiency. Sometimes, they might need to provide some professional knowledge. As for the candidates, although 100 Lives Jingluan was the one who should go, everyone agreed that it was best to let the smarter Gu Fei handle this matter. Chapter 659. Gu Fei's 3 days of game time were all spent on Sword Demon. He was online every day to supervise Sword Demon, and if he found any problems, he would point them out mercilessly. Of course, Gu Fei's game time did not extend much because of this, but when he was not there, Sword Demon practiced hard by himself. Savior of Cowards was also present every day for 3 days. His main function was to be a human player. When Gu Fei first learned Kung Fu, modern methods were used quite a lot. For example, in a teaching like this, Gu Fei would follow his father to watch and talk in front of a projection screen that was several meters large. After watching, the two of them would go out and dismantle it. The dismantling process would be recorded and analyzed later. There were no such conditions in the game, so Gu Fei could only call Savior of Cowards to be the main protagonist. He always complained that there were no playback, slow motion, replay, pause, and other functions. The Sword Ghost didn't have any amazing comprehension ability in this aspect, but his perseverance and indomitable will didn't lose to anyone. With the tenacity he showed in leveling, no matter what aspect he used it in, it was enough to endure and achieve good results. Although there would not be too much obvious progress in 3 days, Gu Fei was very optimistic about this guy. As the saying goes, the master leads the way, but the cultivation depends on the individual. A disciple like Sword Demon was definitely the most worry-free for the master. Gu Fei came every day to supervise, but did Sword Demon still need to supervise? Gu Fei was basically there to teach. As long as Sword Demon could remember, he would stuff as much as possible. Anyway, Sword Demon would rely on his tenacity to digest it. Gu Fei also told him, "If there's something you don't understand, just ask directly. Don't be reserved." Gu Fei was afraid that this guy would also become tenacious in this area. If there was something he didn't understand, he would be too embarrassed to ask. It would be too much of a waste of time to study alone. The things that Gu Fei had given him over the past 3 days were more than enough for the Sword Ghost to digest. The Sword Ghost had done a good job of getting rid of the bad habits that he needed to get rid of. After that, he would have to rely on himself. Gu Fei left Savior of Cowards to give Sword Demon some pointers from time to time. Although the level of Savior of Cowards was far from that of a professional like Gu Fei, he was still much better than Sword Demon. Moreover, this guy was a kung fu enthusiast. Although he couldn't do some things he knew. This was somewhat like Brother Yu. Under such circumstances, he and Sword Demon could teach each other, which could be said to be an improvement for both. After Gu Fei arranged the special training, he joined the market review team. The workshops team was led by 5 knights. There was a total of 11 people, and aside from 5 knights, Shifeng did not recognize the other 10. Their levels varied, and their equipment was extremely ordinary. On Gu Fei's side, besides him, there was only Jian Nanyu and Glue. They didn't need a lot of people. The main thing was that the studio was busy. They just needed to watch from the side. Brother Qianli, come and take a look. These are the reports submitted by our studio's branches in the main cities today. 5 knights said to Gu Fei and the others as soon as they met. There are currently 100 main cities in the game, and each city has around 500,000 players. Currently, players above level 40 were the mainstream, accounting for about 60% of the total number of players. Players between level 30 and 40 made up 30%, and players below level 30, who leveled up relatively quickly, only made up 10% of the total number of players. What we're trying to say is that there's basically no need to develop any efficient leveling methods for players below level 30. We're mainly dealing with players above level 30, especially the level 40 leveling areas. Although the number of leveling areas varies from city to city, the total number of players they can accommodate is roughly the same. Leveling areas between level 30 and 35 can accommodate around 10,000 players at the same time. Leveling areas between level 35 and 40 can accommodate around 20,000. And leveling areas between level 40 and 45 can accommodate more than 50,000. From this increasing number, it can be seen that the game officials have a certain amount of foresight regarding the number of players and the distribution of levels. Coupled with the fact that a considerable number of players are diverted away from quests, if the players can split their time reasonably, the leveling areas will be more than enough. Unfortunately, this time is always the same. The leveling areas will always be overcrowded during the peak hours of 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Yes. Gu Fei nodded, then said, "Tell me about the things we're going to do." "Oh, sorry." 5 knights hurriedly said. Although the capacity of the leveling areas in each city is basically the same, the number of leveling areas in each main city is not uniform. For example, in Moonlit Night City, there are a total of 9 leveling areas between level 40 and 45. In Waterside City, there are only 7 islands. But in Mengta City, there are as many as 12 leveling areas at this stage. 5 knights said. Gu Fei nodded. Having a lot of leveling areas is a bit more troublesome for us. 5 knights nodded and said, "These are the leveling area distribution materials submitted by each main city's branch. You can take a look." 5 knights handed a stack of materials to Gu Fei's group of 3, then continued, "Based on the current total statistics of the 100 main cities, there are a total of 511 leveling areas between level 40 and 50, 204 leveling areas between level 35 and 40, and 117 leveling areas between level 30 and 35. There are a total of 832 leveling areas, and they are all areas that we can develop." 832. Gu Fei's forehead was already covered in sweat. 5 knights looked at him and continued, "Now we need to know the time needed to develop a leveling efficiency method. The difficulty is also different depending on the monster's level. If we use level 45 as an example, it would take about an hour," Gu Fei said. "An hour?" 5 knights also frowned. "If we calculate it like this, then this speed is a bit too slow. If Mr. 100 Generation Strategist is alone, according to the normal 8-hour work schedule, then it would take 104 days to develop all of these. More than 3 months, that's a bit too long." 5 knights said. The plan in his heart was to pursue the word fast. Everything had to be fast, and before the officials could react, they had to make money in one go. He didn't dare to accept a 3-month cycle. Once they went on for a month, the officials would stop the leveling efficiency method. And a studio like Eagle wouldn't dare to disobey. Perhaps they wouldn't stop it on the surface, and would make some adjustments in the dark, making their previous month of development go to waste. This was something that Five Nights couldn't bear. In the end, Gu Fei smiled bitterly and shook his head. You've misunderstood the concept. A set doesn't mean all the playstyles in a leveling area. Based on our previous operation, a leveling area provided a total of 9 playstyles. This, Five Nights was even more surprised. So, developing a leveling area would take almost a day? It's like this. This kind of detailed exploration had only been done once in the White Mills leveling area. Gu Fei and 100 Era's strategist had taught Jiannan Yu and the others about the exploration. That was how they had spent the day. Yesterday, although the monsters in Silent Night Valley were of high levels, only thieves and archers had agility. It was hard for the players to learn the 2-player version. But for Gu Fei and 100 Era's strategist, it was much easier for them to deal with a single monster than a single player. Both of them weren't slow at all, so yesterday's work was done quickly. It was just that teaching was a little tiring. This time, Five Nights suffered an even heavier blow. He realized that the great plan in his heart was only possible in theory. When it came to practical implementation, time became his biggest enemy. Time. In Five Nights' plan, the thing he was most afraid of was wasting time. Why didn't you say so earlier? Five Nights was about to collapse. He was full of confidence in this plan, and he even boasted about it to his boss. Who would have thought that he would only find out about such a crucial problem now? A leveling area could be completed in a day, and 800. More than 2 years. Five Nights gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Jiannan suddenly said, "We can avoid the problem of a leveling area for a day." Why? Five Nights felt that an hour for a leveling area was too much. After experiencing a blow that needed a day, the bottom line in his heart was instantly lowered. Jiannan said leisurely, "Actually, if a leveling area only provides efficient leveling methods for one class at a time, we definitely won't have to worry about the problem of registering players. The reason why we're providing 9 leveling methods in a leveling area is mainly because we're tailor-made. Another reason is that if we're only targeting a single class, we're afraid that players of other classes will maliciously cause trouble. But this time, the situation was different. 800 leveling areas were activated at the same time. We could have 100 leveling areas for mages, 100 for warriors, 100 for thieves, and so on and so forth. The last 100 would be for special needs. Isn't this simpler and more convenient to operate? That's right. Five Nights became spirited when he heard this idea. Why didn't he think of it just now? It seemed that he was too worried. Five Nights patted his head and looked at Jiannan gratefully. Although this way he would return to the 1 hour for a leveling area that he initially disliked. After experiencing such ups and downs, 1 hour for a leveling area made him feel incomparably happy. At this time, Gu Fei also added some information. 1 hour for a leveling area is 104 days. You also felt that it was a bit too long just now. But coincidentally, I have something else to tell you. After this, we can reduce the number of leveling areas. Won't the time be shortened? Five Nights was startled after hearing this. The number of leveling areas would be reduced, but it meant that the income would also be greatly reduced. Just as he was thinking about this, Gu Fei continued, "The efficient leveling method isn't without requirements for monsters. Levels and classes aren't actually too important. The most important thing is that the monsters have to be humanoid." Humanoid monsters? Five Nights was startled. That's right. Humanoid monsters don't have to be human. As long as they stand and act like humans, it's fine. For example, werewolves. But those crawling animals, flying birds and insects, and those elemental wandering souls that had no hands or face were definitely out of the question. If you still think there are too many after removing these, you can also remove the humanoid monsters that use spell chanting as an attack method. If that's not enough, it's enough, it's enough. Let me calculate. Five Nights was anxious. It turned out that not all 800 leveling areas could be played, but they still had to be deleted. Furthermore, the requirement for the humanoid monsters was quite harsh. In such a fantastical world, The non-human creatures that Gu Fei had just mentioned were naturally the main characters. In the scenes where they acted as rehearsal-level NPCs, they were more than enough to compete with the humanoid monsters. Five Knights estimated that with Gu Fei's words, half of the leveling areas would be deleted. This meant that half of the income would be lost. Five Knights felt his heart ache just thinking about it. A large pile of information returned to his hands. He distributed it to the 10 people beside him, and began to quickly organize it. Naturally, the information on the monsters in the leveling areas was also listed. It was easy to tell whether they were humans or ghosts. But even so, the statistics still took a long time. In the end, everyone reported the numbers to each other, and the results came out. Five Knights was very depressed. The parallel world really wasn't a normal human society. After this calculation, the number of humanoid monsters was even less than he had imagined. There were only 331 leveling areas, which was still over 100 away from being half. 331. Five Knights reported the numbers to Gu Fei and the others while calculating in his heart. On the other side, Jiannan directly calculated 331 leveling areas. According to the 40,000 people we previously leveled at the White Mill, each person will be charged 99 gold coins. That will be 31 billion gold coins. According to the current exchange rate of 100 gold coins to 30 renminbi, it will be around 300 million gold coins. How much is it? 20%. Gu Fei said. Then the bottom line is 60 million. Jiannan nodded and said, No. Five Knights had already begun to shake his head. When he received the information, he had already roughly estimated the profits. Of course, he had already prepared for it. Although 800 had become 300, the principle was still the same. After Five Knights shouted no, he continued. Right now 331 leveling areas are open at the same time. It's completely different from when you only opened one leveling area. We can't use your numbers to calculate here. Then how do you think we should calculate it? Gu Fei asked. There's a problem that I've been emphasizing, and that is the risk. It's mainly from the gaming company. Frankly speaking, I don't think this deal will end well. It's very likely that we'll be stopped by the gaming company right from the start. So my plan is different from your original actions. This time, we put up the signboard of 331 leveling areas. This influence is too big. We don't have time to wait for 1 or 2 days for players to register. At most, we'll have to start teaching in 1 or 2 hours. This is because we need to race against time with the gaming company. Perhaps the moment we put up the advertisement, they'll already be holding a meeting to discuss how to deal with this matter. We have to get ahead of them as soon as possible, and make as much money as possible. That's why there's a lot of flexibility in how much we can earn from this trip. This, combined with the game company's reaction, is something we can't predict. Using your method to get 40,000 people isn't a good idea for us, Five Knights said. Oh. Then what will you do if the gaming company asks you to stop? Gu Fei asked. That can't be helped. We Inky have a partial partnership with the gaming company. If they ask us to stop, we have to comply, Five Knights said. Then after they ask us to stop, what should we do for the players who have already paid the money but haven't had time to learn the efficient leveling method? Gu Fei asked. Butterfly knot. The connecting plot is expected to be completed tomorrow. Next week will be the content of the new generation. Chapter 660. Five Knights said with a serious expression. This is exactly what I'm worried about. That's why I've been emphasizing the importance of time. We can only teach as many players as possible before the game company stops us. Once we stop, for the sake of our studio's reputation, we'll have to refund the players who have paid but haven't had the time to learn the efficient leveling method. If that's the case. Gu Fei nodded. And Brother Qianli, do you have any other questions? Nothing else. Gu Fei said. Then let's continue with the estimation of the profit. Brother Qianli, how long do you think it'll take for the game company to see our advertisement and react? Five Knights said in a negotiating tone. If they act quickly and react immediately after seeing the advertisement, what do we do? Gu Fei asked. Then we can only accept this deal. Five Nights said. Hee, if that's the case, then the profit might be zero. Wouldn't our 20% commission be equivalent to nothing? Gu Fei said. Five Nights also laughed, but that's just Brother Qianli's assumption. From our understanding of the game's operating system, the probability of them responding immediately is too small. From seeing the advertisement, to notifying the person in charge, to negotiating, to making a decision, and then to announcing it to the necessary people, this process isn't short. Especially if we choose to do it during the peak hours of the weekend. Although the game is operating normally, the higher-ups are resting at home, so we need more time to contact them. We can make full use of this. Also, we're not going to directly release the news on a public forum like you guys. We'll use our in-game channels to spread the news in the game. This way, the game company will need more time to notice. And there's really a lot of methods, Gu Fei exclaimed. Of course. Five Nights smiled. Actually, dealing with the game company has always been one of our main jobs. I can't say that I completely understand their every move, but I still know a little. Gu Fei laughed. So, you're actually very sure that the game company will definitely stop the efficient leveling method, right? Gu Fei said. Who can be sure about that? It's just that I think there's a possibility, so of course I have to guard against it. Wuyi said. That's right. We definitely have to be on guard, but that's not what we should be on guard against, Gu Fei said. Brother Qianli, what do you mean? Five Nights was confused. Gu Fei stood up. You asked me and 100-era strategist to help you develop an efficient leveling method. This is actually your defense, isn't it? What do you mean? Wuyi asked. Speaking of which, the studio is really an incredible existence. You're familiar with the game, the players, and the game company. In the game environment, you're probably the only ones who can do this. Even the game company thinks about the players from the big picture. They can't put themselves in everyone's shoes. They use the game's playability and interest to earn money. They're not like you guys, who rack their brains to figure out which settings are profitable business opportunities. Five Nights continued to be confused. Brother Qianli, what are you talking about? It's because you have this understanding in many aspects that you have this plan, isn't it? Gu Fei said. My plan? As long as the efficient leveling method is promoted, it will definitely be stopped. This is what you believe even more. What you have to guard against is not stopping it, but not stopping it. That's why you looked for me and 100-era's strategist to provide you with the efficient leveling method. If you don't stop it, you'll have real things to teach. Gu Fei said. I don't quite understand Brother Qianli's words. According to what you're saying, can we still do this business without the efficient leveling method? Five Nights said. Of course we can. Advertising and paying a deposit are all things that we've already done successfully. You just have to do it again. But the difference this time is that the scope is too wide. That's why after receiving the deposit, and before we can organize the teaching, the game company will come forward and stop this activity. So you don't need to provide the efficient leveling method. Gu Fei looked at Five Nights. Five Nights opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but Gu Fei had already continued. You just said that once you stop it, you'll definitely stop it. Of course, this is necessary. But you also said that you'll refund the tuition fees you've already received. I'm afraid the article is here, right? How is that possible? If you don't believe me, we can write this in the contract and you can supervise us. Five Nights said angrily. Of course this will be written in the contract. As long as there is this, the tuition fees collected in advance will be refunded. In the end, we'll only get the minimum guaranteed commission that we agreed on. This is all the capital of your public relations. What public relations? Of course it's the direction of the player's public opinion after the stoppage incident. You'll direct the player's resentment towards the game company as much as possible. You'll refund the tuition fees collected in advance, but I think it'll only be a small portion. As long as this small portion can create a certain amount of reputation, it'll be fine. I don't know what reasons you'll find, but in short, it'll go into your own pockets. It's easy to find a reason. South Azure Sword suggested to Five Nights. When the time comes, you can publicly announce that you want a refund, But the message must say that because you didn't prepare in advance, there's no file or list of information. So you hope that the players will be self-aware. Then you can say that many players unconsciously sneak in at this time to cheat 99 gold coins. The number of people you've received for a refund is several times more than what you should have received, so you really can't handle it. How about it? This idea is good, right? Glue listened and nodded. If the players continue to ask for a refund, then there's no other way. We'll grit our teeth and pay it all. But there's only so much money, so we can't give everyone 99. We can only divide and take what we should get. Players, don't blame us. There's no surplus food in the landlord's house. If you want to blame someone, blame these guys who came out to pretend to be you. Yes. If you're generous, you can claim that you've added more money to compensate. Also, you have to say that you've paid Qianli and the 100 Era statesman's deposits and commissions. This way, the players will see that you've also lost a lot, and they'll sympathize with you, so they won't make a fuss anymore. Plus, you'll deliberately guide the players, so you won't get scolded in the end. If you're lucky, you'll even have a good reputation in some people's hearts, South Azure Sword said. You too. Gu Fei shook his head. You've already said everything. What are you asking Brother Five Nights to say? Five Nights' expression didn't change at this time. He said with a smile. You guys really like to joke. What are you talking about? There's no such thing. But now we're seriously suspicious. What should we do? Gu Fei looked at him. Five Nights frowned and said, You guys have to use these groundless rumors to doubt me. What can I do? Do you have any proof that you think so? We don't need proof. Gu Fei said. Once we suspect you, we can't do business. You, on the other hand, should provide some evidence to prove that you didn't have such a plan. You're deliberately making things difficult for us, Five Nights said angrily. Gu Fei looked at South Azure Sword and Glue. Do you think he's really angry now, or is he pretending? He's pretending. There's an idiom. What's it called? Glue said as he looked at South Azure Sword. Is he pretending? South Azure Sword said. Something like that. It's fine as long as you get the idea, Glue said. You. Five Nights slammed the table and stood up angrily. Don't slam the table, Gu Fei said. Although you have more people, it's not good. This is their own table, South Azure Sword reminded. Gu Fei thought about it and agreed. The place they were meeting today wasn't a tavern or a barbecue restaurant. It was Inch Studios' official office in the main city. It was their own table. Slap it however you like. But let me tell you, slamming the table doesn't count as evidence. Gu Fei said. Don't go too far. Five Nights couldn't take it anymore. Gu Fei saw that Five Nights was really angry. He patted his body and stood up. We're just talking about business. There's no bullying. We're just talking. If we can't talk, then we won't do it. Like now, let's go. Gu Fei lured South Azure Sword and Glue away. Five Nights said slowly from behind. Qianli, don't be too arrogant. Inch Studio isn't something you can bully. Although Five Nights didn't have good intentions, he had spent a lot of time and effort on this matter. He had written the contract in-game, written the contract outside of the game, thought of ideas, compiled the materials submitted, and communicated with his colleagues in the various main cities of the studio. He was only the director of 6 cities. There were 100 main cities in the game. People of the same level as him could form a guild. This project was carried out by the entire server, but it was given to him. His colleagues also wanted a share of the pie. Five Nights had to think about how to talk to Gu Fei and the others. He also had to deal with the problems in the studio. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that there were internal and external problems. It wasn't easy to settle everything. There was only one last hurdle left. Once they passed it, they would see the light of day. But in the end, they were crushed by a few words from Gu Fei. Gu Fei's guess wasn't wrong. Five Nights was surprised that his plan was seen through by this person. He felt guilty at first. But no matter how guilty he was, he couldn't take all this ridicule. Wuxia's nerves, which had been stretched taut for the past few days, were finally stimulated to the critical point and broke. Hearing Five Nights' cold threat, Gu Fei turned around and glanced at him. He didn't say anything and continued to walk. Of course, Jiannan and Glue didn't say anything. The three of them opened the door and walked out. Five Nights was still angry. When he saw that Gu Fei didn't talk back and thought that he was in the right, he boldly chased after him. As soon as he stepped out of the door frame, he saw a flash of fire coming down on his face. Five Nights didn't even see it clearly before he died. Gu Fei put the sword in his pocket and said, "Seeing that you were the owner of the room just now, I couldn't kill you. You actually dared to chase after me. You're too arrogant." Although this room was the office of Inch Studio, it was still under the player's name in the game. This room was under the name of Five Nights. Players couldn't be attacked in their own room. Jiannan and Glue wiped their sweat. No wonder they didn't react before coming out. Damn this Five Nights, he actually chased after them. Wasn't he looking for death? This person is really sneaky. On the way out, Gu Fei sighed with emotion at Jiannan and Glue. I knew it. He described this business to be so risky, and he even had to teach students at the same time. I always felt that he must have an ulterior motive for spending so much effort on such an unreliable business. Yeah. Jiannan and Glue nodded. I was almost cheated. Gu Fei said. That you can't say that he cheated, right? Glue said. To be honest, his plan didn't lose anything on our side. It was just that he cheated the players. Why didn't he cheat? On the one hand, their studio has to care about their image. On the other hand, it was specifically targeted at us. If this part of the black income is included, who knows how much the 20% will be. Anyway, it will definitely be more than the lowest guaranteed commission he agreed on. Jiannan said. Gu Fei also nodded. He always talks about cooperation, but what kind of cooperation is it? He just wants to use us as a gun and use us from the beginning to the end. In the end, the fact that we get 20% will become an excuse for him to put gold on his face. That's right. Jiannan Yu and Glue said in unison. They didn't like the feeling of being used as a tool. From this guy's words, I think the game company will definitely come out to stop it. They might have already received the news from the inside. If we continue, I don't know how many times we can do it. Gu Fei said. Jiannan thought about it and said, why don't we do it like this time and get in touch with some guilds and do private transactions? We don't need to advertise on the forum and attract attention. That's useless. If the game company has already paid attention, the people who are doing this may have already been noticed. Is it possible that they have this kind of background surveillance? Gu Fei asked. Probably. Jiannan and Glue said. Sigh. Gu Fei sighed. Why didn't this kung fu have a place to survive? No one believed it in reality, and the game didn't allow it. Over there, people called Harmony chased them into the game. Here, they relied on kung fu to do some tricks and were targeted by the game company. The pressure was too great. After Gu Fei went back, he told 100 Generations Jingluan in detail. In fact, when he found the problem during the discussion, Gu Fei sent a message to 100 Generations Jingluan to briefly analyze it. After all, 100 Generations Jingluan was the biggest and most direct beneficiary of this transaction. At the very least, he should have the right to know. 100 Generations Jingluan's values were the same as Gu Fei's. If Gu Fei didn't approve of it, of course he would look down on it. Previously, he had a good impression of Five Nights, but now that he knew what was going on, he couldn't help but spit. After hearing this news, Deepwater was also very surprised. He said, the new generation excels the old. He didn't expect Five Nights to be waiting here in the end. No wonder he was willing to split the profits. It turned out that it was premeditated. As for Five Nights' last threat, Deepwater judged that it was just words said out of anger. The studio was here for money. If the business failed, they wouldn't come to take revenge. It was possible for studios to suppress each other. Although Gu Fei was the #1 assassin in the game, he was just an ordinary player in their eyes. They didn't need to be angry with an ordinary player. However, Deepwater still reminded Gu Fei earnestly, they probably won't take revenge, but it's not like they won't. If there's a chance to mess with you in the future, they won't mind giving you a kick. Moreover, studios aren't like players who only know how to fight and kill. Revenge doesn't necessarily mean PK. Gu Fei was originally excited when he heard about revenge, but when he heard that the studio's revenge wasn't just fighting, but also other tricks, he suddenly felt very bored. The days went back to before. Gu Fei returned to Cloud City and continued to train Sword Demon. He had already corrected some concepts. Now he just had to let Sword Demon continue to adapt while teaching him some skills. In addition, the studio received another business deal. This time it was from a guild. Everyone analyzed the prospects of the efficient leveling method and felt that it wasn't bad to sell it in secret. Maybe the game company wouldn't notice and just let it go. This time, it was a strange guild in an unfamiliar main city. They didn't have any friendship at all. No one was willing to sell it so cheaply, so they offered a price of 2 million to the other party. A level 6 guild only had 1,050 players. If they had to pay 2,000 gold per person for 2 million gold, they definitely wouldn't be able to afford it. However, even if they offered 500,000 gold, they would still have to pay 500 gold per person. They couldn't afford it no matter what. Everyone felt that they shouldn't treat themselves unfairly, so they offered a higher price and told the other party to think of a way out. This guild leader really had a way. If one guild couldn't afford it, they would find a few more. This person contacted so many guilds. In the end, they tossed around tens of thousands of people. In the end, they paid 200 gold per person and bought the deal. The group went to the area and carried out development and teaching work. Everything went smoothly. There were no players causing trouble, and no game company stopping them. Could it be that the game company didn't care about the efficient leveling method? While everyone was secretly speculating, the game company dropped a bombshell at this time, announcing two very important updates. First, after this update, the game will no longer generate new currency. Only the existing currency will be used. Part of the existing currency will be in the hands of players, while the rest will be in the hands of NPCs. The system has finished integrating the NPC's currency. Whether it was the owner of a tavern, the vendor of a grocery store, the lord of a city, or a citizen who issued quests, they all had a fixed amount of currency. Quests, businesses, rewards, fines, taxes, and so on were all ways of using currency. The currency in the hands of NPCs would also be used in many ways. It would either be used by players or by other NPCs. As soon as this announcement was made, the sale of gold on the game's major trading platforms was cancelled. Everyone realized that the value of gold would soar because of this, so it was better to keep it in their pockets and wait. At the same time, many people thought, if the amount of currency was fixed, then what about the items? Would it also form a fixed industrial chain with the fixed currency, and from then on, it wouldn't change at will? Chapter 661. This update caused a huge uproar. Studios, professional players, ordinary players, professional players, players with money. All kinds of players reacted to this update the moment they saw it. What was especially strange was a player from a certain main city. He strongly condemned this update, and his statement received a positive response. In an instant, tens of thousands of people came forward to sign their names. Just as everyone was shocked, Brother Yu, who was reading the thread in front of the computer, silently closed the thread. This was the alliance of 10,000 guilds that had just completed the transaction of the efficiency leveling method. After a major transaction of 200 gold coins, they suddenly released this update. How could they not be furious? There were many people like them. Countless players who had spent all their money in the last second of the update were now grief-stricken. As for Brother Yu, he was browsing the web while discussing his next deal on QQ. With the sudden announcement of the update, Brother Yu immediately knew that the transaction was going to fall through. Sure enough, the avatar on the other side of QQ jumped and sent a look at the update message. After that, there were no more messages. Many people who had just read the opening had already rushed to the forum to complain. In reality, this update by the officials was also lengthy. After the opening, there were thousands of words. The officials said that the game's currency would stop being refreshed, but it did not mean that they would no longer interfere. However, from now on, the currency refresh would no longer be uncontrolled. The officials would adjust the amount of currency, the quantity of goods, the price of goods, and the speed of currency circulation in the game. For this reason, they had specially hired the famous economic expert XXX as a consultant. Of course, The players had no idea what this XXX was. However, after seeing the officials' comments, some of the players who knew a little about the game understood. The rules of controlling the release of the currency were almost the same as a country's currency in real life. The official was continuing the path of making the game more realistic. However, the problem was that in real life, goods were produced, processed, reprocessed, and put on the market. People used money to purchase them, and the money that was used to purchase them was put back into production. This was a perfect cycle. However, there was no such system in the game. This was because the items in the game were never produced by the input of money. Instead, they were refreshed by the system. Without this kind of industrial chain structure, the currency was controlled, but the goods were constantly produced in large quantities. Players held on to their money tightly and were reluctant to spend it. Wouldn't that cause economic regression? The game officials did not say much about this, but the players were able to sniff out some clues from another rule. Among the minor rules derived from this currency rule, one of them was that if one did not log into the game for a month, their account would be erased, and all the currency and items in the account would be confiscated. If there were special circumstances that required them to stop playing for more than a month, they would have to apply to the system for account preservation. What the players noticed was the fact that the items were confiscated. If the currency was taken back by the system, it would naturally be easy to stuff it into the hands of any NPC. However, the items would also be confiscated. Could it be that the items would be controlled by the system like the currency? As the system made this announcement, the update was still in progress, so the players had no way to go into the game to farm monsters and experiment. They were all extremely anxious. Some online trading websites, after all the currency trading orders were taken back, the number of equipment trading orders also decreased. The online trading orders were all directly traded with RMB. Right now, the value of gold in the game was bound to increase. Although the value of equipment would decrease, due to the subtle confiscation of items, the gold price of the equipment might just be an illusion due to the appreciation of gold. Its true value would actually increase. At the end of the day, RMB was the true hard currency in the game. If you really wanted to compare the value, you would have to use RMB to measure it. As they were temporarily unable to log into the game, the players could only worry helplessly. As for the second update, in reality, it was something that the players were very concerned about recently. However, under the gold rule, it seemed insignificant. The second update was City War. At a time when everyone was panicking, the system actually created such a major event like City War. The players felt that this was like starting a war to divert the attention of the people. However, complaining was just complaining. This was something that everyone had been concerned about for a long time. There were still many people paying attention to it, especially the guild leaders of the big guilds. No one expected that the rules of this city war would be completely different from what they had expected. The city war was still a competition between players, but it wasn't a direct confrontation. Instead, it was through attacking the city. The system would determine the power division of the main city based on the points awarded. Power division was another subtle choice of words. The players hadn't even figured out what was going on yet, and now, the game developers had sent out these unclear updates. The players were furious. The guild leaders of the major cities went on QQ, YY, MSN, and all other communication tools to contact the players in their guilds. They went to the forums to make a ruckus, insisting that the game developers explain the situation clearly. The officials were also furious. There were people who didn't even finish reading the previous update before running out to spout nonsense. Why was it like this time? Actually, this time, the players couldn't be blamed. The number of visitors on the official website was too high, and the page refreshed very slowly. When the players saw the second update, they thought that the power division was over, but in reality, it hadn't refreshed completely. After shouting and yelling for a while, they turned around and took a glance. Why was there a scroll bar next to it? They hurriedly scrolled down, and the content was complete. It turned out that the meaning of the power division was, the final ownership of the main city wouldn't belong to any guild. The highest ruler of the main city would still be the system. The guilds would form a ranking in the main city attack battle. and the system would finally divide the main city's power division, according to their points. The calculation method was very simple. All the main cities would be divided into 10,000 points, and the guilds would be divided according to their points according to their ranking. For example, after the city war ended, the first-place guild would receive 1,000 points, and would be given 10% of its territory. The second-place guild would receive 500 points, and another 500 points would be given to the second-place guild. And so on and so forth until all 10,000 points were distributed. Even if the remaining guilds received points, they would not be given any territory to claim their territory. The way to obtain points was naturally the simplest and most direct way to kill the defending enemy troops. However, killing enemies not only required quantity, but also quality. Battles that had a decisive impact on the final outcome of the battle would have more generous points as rewards. In addition, killing enemies was only the most direct way to obtain points, but it wasn't the only way. There were also a large number of siege-related quests that could also be used to obtain points. Some of the weaker guilds might be able to obtain more points than the bigger guilds in a siege battle if they used it well. In conclusion, a siege war didn't just require bravery. It also required wisdom and luck. This final rule was something that many players didn't expect. Although they didn't expect it, it was reasonable. The main city in the game was quite large, but the largest guild at the moment only had a little over 1,000 people. It was simply a joke to have a city war with such a small number of people. Even if 2 or 3 or 4 guilds fought against each other, they still wouldn't be able to occupy such a large area. This move by the system could be said to be a magnificent feat. At this time, the players couldn't care less about the gold coins, and they couldn't enter the game for the time being. Therefore, very soon, everyone began to busy themselves with the upcoming guild war. The chat group of the guild leaders that was just a game company condemning conference immediately turned into a strategic deployment before the city war. The game officials announced the rules of the city war, and especially pointed out that there were quests in one of the sections. However, the specific content of the quests was not mentioned in the usual style. The more powerful guilds were creeped out by the statement that some of the weaker guilds, if used properly, might be able to obtain more points than the bigger guilds in a siege battle. They temporarily decided that the main force would kill the enemy to obtain points, and the weaker ones would be responsible for searching for quests. This update was obviously very large. The game hadn't been released for the entire day, and the estimated release date had been pushed back 3 times in a row. The game forum became the busiest day ever since the game was released. The number of online players on the forum even broke the online player record during the guild and mercenary group competition. Almost all the players in the parallel world were waiting for the game to be released while scrolling through the forum for gossip. The city war was set for 2 days during the weekend, and the update took up an entire day on Wednesday. After the update on Thursday, the game was released once again. When the players stepped into the game again, they felt a little lost and unfamiliar. The players who reacted immediately rushed to the exchange hall, auction house, and other places in a frenzy, wanting to withdraw all the items that they had consigned for sale. After yesterday's day of suspicion, many players agreed with the statement that not only gold coins, but also equipment will not be able to be farmed in the future. However, before these people could rush to the auction house and the exchange hall, the system had already made an announcement in the world. Due to the adjustment of the gold coin rules, the economy has been completely reshuffled. The equipment and items that the players had consigned for sale previously have been withdrawn and returned to the players' pockets. Since the game was released, this was the first time that the system had shown warmth. Many people shed tears of relief. The guys from Child Elite Group had also come online at this time, and were celebrating in the channel. Compared to the players who had just spent a lot of money before the update, these guys had really made a huge profit. The efficiency of leveling up was just before the update, and there was definitely no one who had more gold coins in the game than them. Looking at the gold coins in their hands rising in value, how could these guys not be happy? Gu Fei was relatively calm, and said disapprovingly, "Good for nothing." As soon as he came online, before the people from the mercenary group could greet him, July from Reborn Amethyst had already sent him a private message, telling him to hurry back and participate in the city war in 2 days. In Reborn Amethyst's channel, Slender Waist Dance was currently wailing in grief. This girl was also one of the unlucky ones in this update. 2 days ago, she had just bought a lot of items and was preparing to exchange RMB for gold coins, but in the end, she was caught up in the update. Now that she was back, all the orders for RMB to buy gold coins were gone, and everyone was holding on to their gold coins tightly, waiting for it to rise in value. At this time, Slender Waist Dance only had a few copper coins left in her pocket. Spending money so cleanly, she could be considered a genius. My condolences, my condolences. For the first time, Gu Fei also sent a message to express his condolences, and it immediately attracted a crowd. In the memory of all the girls, this was the first time Qianli spoke in the guild channel when he was drunk. Qianli, you have quite a lot of gold coins on you, right? A while ago, your Qianli's drunk studio was the one that made the most money. Luoluo said. I don't have much, so I gave it all to them. Gu Fei said. Good for nothing, I didn't ask you for money. Slender Waist Dance looked at Gu Fei with disdain for pretending to be poor. It really isn't much, I only have a few tens of thousands. Gu Fei said. A few tens of thousands wasn't much. If it wasn't for all the girls here, they would have definitely cursed at him. However, everyone knew that a few tens of thousands wasn't a lot to them. Didn't those guys all get around 200,000 each time? A few tens of thousands isn't a lot, let's split it among everyone. Luoluo joked. Okay. Gu Fei was very straightforward. There was an awkward silence in the channel. The girls weren't as shameless as Yu Tianxinming's unscathed in battle. If it was them, even if they were shocked, they would still be discussing how to split the money. Ahem. I'm joking. Luoluo said. Yeah, I know. I'm joking too. Gu Fei said. Fuck. Slender Waist Dance led the others in disdain. It was clear that being a person was difficult. If you say give it to them, they don't want it. But if you say no, they'll say you're stingy. Gu Fei chatted in the 2 chat channels as he walked towards Amethyst's office. He had been in Cloud City for the past few days, and now that he was out of the revival point, he headed over. There weren't many people in the office when he arrived, only a few had arrived. Most of them had just logged on and were rushing over, so there weren't many who were as fast as Gu Fei. The only ones who arrived earlier than him, other than those who logged off, were Slender Waist Dance. Slender Waist Dance was still crying, but when she saw Gu Fei, she opened her hand to reveal 4 pitiful copper coins. Look, there's only a few left. Yeah. Gu Fei nodded, took out a gold coin from his pocket, and tossed it into her hand. Here's a gold coin for you. I'll kill you. Slender Waist Dance pulled out her sword and was about to pounce, but Gu Fei hurriedly took out a myriad gold pouch and tossed it into her hand. Take this first. That's more like it. Slender Waist Dance accepted it without hesitation. July and the others' eyes were popping out. He really dared to give this one, and that one, he really dared to accept that one. Slender Waist Dance had another 10,000 gold, and her smile returned to her face. She put the myriad gold pouch into her pocket, and threw away the ones in her hand as she was annoyed. Gu Fei was speechless. Rich people were rich people after all. No matter how much trouble you made in the game, you wouldn't be able to hurt them at all. Slender Waist Dance was in dire straits, mainly because she had money but had no way to buy gold coins. When the market normalized, she would still be the number 1 RMB warrior. The few coins that Slender Waist Dance threw away were silently picked up by July and stuffed back into her hand. She then looked at Gu Fei and said, Let's talk about the city war. Our guild is very weak, and killing enemies for points is definitely not possible. We can only rely on quests. What do you think, Qianli? Why are you asking me? You guys can decide for yourselves. Gu Fei didn't care at all. But there are so many guilds. Even if we snatch quests, we won't have any advantage. It seems like we can just accompany the prince and have some fun. July said. Yeah. Gu Fei nodded. He quite agreed with this view. The situation this time was completely different from the guild competition. At that time, it was a one-on-one elimination, and an accident could decide the outcome of the match. That was why the reborn Amethyst still had a chance to be a dark horse. But this time, All the guilds were competing against the same starting line, and the chances of them taking advantage of the situation were greatly reduced. Can points be bought? Slender Waist Dance asked. They couldn't even buy gold coins, and they still hadn't changed their habits. It can't be. How can it be bought? Tua said. Then can we hire a mercenary group? Gu Fei asked. There's no description. You're thinking of. July thought that Gu Fei would bring their child elite group to help, but then she suddenly remembered that apart from Sword Demon and Brother Yu, everyone else in their group had a guild, so she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. I have a few friends who don't have a guild. I wonder what this activity is for. Gu Fei was actually thinking of South Sword and the other 7. They were neither a guild nor a mercenary group, but they learned from Child Elite Group and formed their own mercenary group. As for the Child Elite Group, they did indeed have a guild, and they were all participating in their own guild meeting. Han Family Young Master and Unscathed in Battle. Based on their level rankings, even if they weren't the core members of their guilds, they still had the qualifications to attend this kind of core meeting. Yutian Shenming originally had a conflict with Unhindered Forces because of Gu Fei, so he was only a nominal existence in the guild. However, after Unhindered Forces' quest, Child Elite Group helped him greatly at a crucial moment, so this conflict didn't exist anymore. Yutian Shenming was indeed a top-notch expert, so he was summoned again. As for the guildless Sword Demon and Brother Yu, Sword Demon acted as if nothing had happened and continued to practice. Brother Yu also went with Sword Demon. Recently, there were many rumors about the drop rates of the mobs in the past. Once the game started, Brother Yu couldn't wait to study it. The system didn't mention anything about mercenary groups. It only said that guilds are participating. It seems like there's nothing to do with mercenary groups. July said. The system didn't say anything, but it shouldn't stop mercenary groups from participating, right? At most, the people they kill won't be counted, but for example, when doing some quests, it might still be useful. Gu Fei said. Even if that's the case, in this situation, mercenary groups. How do we calculate the price? July said. Currently, the economy was in a state of confusion. No one knew how much a gold coin was worth. At this moment, Han Family Young Master suddenly sent a message in the mercenary channel. Yo, this update isn't bad. What's wrong? The others hurriedly asked. Han Family Young Master had spoken. Could it be that this guy found some loophole? Everyone was excited. The wine has been reduced. Han Family Young Master said. Oh. How much? Brother Yu was quick-witted. 10 times. Han Family Young Master said. 10 times. Is this the current system's current currency value? Brother Yu mumbled. It's just wine. But to me, it's equivalent to having 10 times the money in my hands. This update is really good. Han Family Young Master said. Chapter 662. The prices of the items have been adjusted too? How generous. Brother Yu didn't expect this at first. He hurriedly went out with the Sword Demon to kill small monsters and see what they dropped. They hadn't even left the door when Brother Yu heard the news and hurriedly slipped into a shop by the side of the road. This was a weapon shop. The systems shop didn't sell anything good. It was just some common equipment, and they were quite expensive. Normally, no one would pay attention to it, treating it like a garbage collection station. If they found some trash that no players would buy, they would just throw it at this shop. The blacksmith in the weapon shop also sold equipment repair services that were more popular. Every day, they wouldn't miss the opportunity to repair the equipment that they passed by. Brother Yu entered the weapon shop and found that it was very lively. A large group of players crowded in the room. He almost didn't even have a place to stand. Brother Yu didn't have time to be surprised. Another person came in and pushed him into the door. The room was crowded and messy. He heard a player shouting, "It's my turn, it's my turn." What's going on? Brother Yu asked a player who was desperately squeezing forward. Making money. The player replied without turning his head. You don't know anything. Why are you joining in the fun? Someone looked back at Brother Yu with dissatisfaction. Brother Yu grew up in disdain. He didn't take these words seriously and continued to ask shamelessly, "How do you make money?" There were naturally good people, Someone said to him. Blacksmithing and issuing mission orders to collect all kinds of ores. Didn't they collect in the past? Brother Yu was puzzled. The weapon shop in the game had always collected all kinds of ores. For example, the armorsmith shop would collect some leather and cloth. The tailor shop was the same. This didn't seem to be anything new. In the end, someone immediately looked down on Brother Yu for being shallow. Is it still the same as before? Didn't you hear? There will be a limit to the number of these missions in the future. That's just gossip on the forum. Brother Yu said. How could Brother Yu not know about the news that was stirred up in the forum? There would still be money-making quests, but there would be a limit to the number of quests. This was the answer that everyone agreed upon in a certain thread on the forum. In fact, there was no official statement. It was just speculation. Yesterday it was gossip, but now it isn't, someone said. Why? Is there really a limit? Brother Yu asked. I don't know yet, but the blacksmith shop has a limit on the number of weapons they can sell, someone said. Is that so? Let me see. Brother Yu squeezed forward with all his might. No one would compete with Brother Yu for the equipment in the blacksmith shop. Seeing that this guy didn't want to compete with them for the quest, everyone let Brother Yu live. Brother Yu panted heavily as he squeezed in front of the weapon shop owner. Sure enough, in the past, the few weapons on the weapon rack were just for show. In fact, they were limitless. As long as you bought them, there was no need to worry about the system not selling them. But now it was different. There were only a few weapons on the weapon rack. There were no more. Brother Yu was surprised. Even if no one wanted your items, it wasn't that absolute. You only had 3 to 5 weapons on display. If someone was crazy enough to take them all, then the weapon shop would be empty. Wouldn't that be a joke? Brother Yu thought about it and asked about the price. This was the same as the wine in the tavern. There was a price reduction, but it wasn't like the wine that was reduced by 10 times. Compared to the original price, it couldn't be compared. Even Brother Yu didn't know the original price. It was just that no one had ever paid attention to the system's whiteboards. They didn't pay attention to their value. It was just a fleeting impression. Now that they looked at it, they only knew that it was cheaper. Brother Yu thought about it while casually glancing at the equipment on the weapon rack. He suddenly shouted, "Blue equipment? Gold equipment? Fuck, there's even purple equipment." Everyone looked down on Brother Yu's ignorance. Tisk, it's purple. Do you dare to buy it? On the weapon rack was a purple one-handed sword. One side of the blade was sharp, while the other side was cut into a sawtooth shape. The name of the sword was Cold Black Saw. It added 15 points to strength and constitution, 5 points to agility, 35% attack power, 20% chance of inflicting wounds, 25% damage per second, lasting 6 seconds. There was no cure. It's a weapon with effects. Brother Yu continued to exclaim. In the past, players only divided weapons into skill weapons and non-skill weapons. Weapons with skills were worth more than those without skills. However, as the equipment became more abundant, players gradually discovered that weapons could actually be divided into 3 main categories. The first category was skill weapons. In addition to additional attributes, the weapon came with a skill. The second category was effect weapons, which would produce some special effects when attacking. In fact, there were such weapons in the early days, such as enchantment and fatal strike. However, because players had seen so many of them, they regarded them as ordinary and did not pay attention to them. It was not until there were more and more types of effects that players realized that these types of weapons also belonged to a major category. As for the third category, there were no skills or effects. They were weapons with additional attributes. At first, players thought that these types of weapons were the most worthless. However, later on, they discovered that weapons without skills or effects would have more outstanding attack power and additional attributes. In terms of weapon damage alone, this category was the strongest. The Black Chilling Saw had an additional effect of 25% damage per second for 6 seconds. Moreover, it could not be healed. This meant that as long as this effect was triggered, the damage would be increased by 2.5 times. It was quite powerful, and the 20% chance was not low. The Twilight Sword that Brother Yu was using was also an effect weapon. It could create a weakening effect, but the chance was only 10%. Excellent, practical. This kind of equipment was actually sold in the shop. This was not the style of the parallel world. Brother Yu was surprised and asked for the price again. It was 2,000 gold. If this price was before the currency update, it would have been quite suitable. At this time, it would have been snapped up by people. However, in the current situation, everything in the game had been reduced in price, but this item had not moved. Moreover, no one knew how to earn back the money they had spent. Who would dare to mess around? Moreover, even before the currency update, there were not many people who could afford 2,000 gold. Therefore, the players did not care about Brother Yu's shouting. They were waiting to see how this guy would react when he saw the price of 2,000 gold. 2,000 gold. Brother Yu muttered in his heart. If it was yesterday, this was not a big price. But today, if one were to use alcohol as the unit of measurement like the Han family young master, this weapon would be equivalent to 10 times the price. Brother Yu was also a very calm person. Although he had a solid wallet, he would not be arrogant. At this time, when he turned around, he saw that the players in the room were looking at him with ridicule. It was as if they were waiting for him to turn around and make a joke out of himself. The usually calm Brother Yu suddenly had a sudden impulse. Everyone's eyes told him that they were looking at Brother Yu making a fuss, but in the end, he would not buy it. Brother Yu, who had always been a passerby, suddenly had an impulse to make people look at him in a new light. He suddenly turned around, knocked on the cabinet, and coolly pointed at the black chilling saw. "Give it to me, I want it." The system merchant was still the same after the update. He would grant the players every request. When he heard Brother Yu say he wanted it, he immediately turned around to get the sword. Brother Yu casually threw 2 money bags on the cabinet. He turned around and glanced at the players. He was delighted. Dumbfounded? You didn't think that the system would really dare to buy it. It turned out that spending money sometimes wasn't about buying things but the feeling of shopping. Brother Yu was very happy. He paid the money and took the sword. He was not in a hurry at all. Slowly, he walked out of the weapon shop under the dumbfounded gaze of the crowd. Of course, even though he was burning money, Brother Yu did not miss the details. He noticed that after he paid for the sword, the equipment was no longer on the weapon rack. The weapon shop owner took another sword from the blacksmith and put it on the rack. This time it was just an ordinary white sword. It would really be gone after selling it. The white sword that the boss took out might be the stock that was prepared for this update. But no matter what, the stock would eventually be sold out. At that time, would the weapon shop just be empty? Would the system allow such a big joke to appear in the game? Just as Brother Yu was thinking, he suddenly remembered that he had been too focused on burning the buns just now. He had originally planned to sell an unwanted piece of equipment to the boss. He wanted to test if the system would return the money after collecting the equipment, but he had forgotten. The weapon shop had put on an act for once. Brother Yu was too embarrassed to return. Fortunately, the weapon shop was not the only shop in Cloud City. Brother Yu walked a few streets and came to another one. After such a short time, this weapon shop was even more lively than the previous one. People were piling up on the street. It seemed like some impatient person had been wondering if this money-making quest was still around since last night, so he tried it out as soon as he got online. Then, the news spread, and players who were afraid that they wouldn't be able to earn money from now on all rushed over. People were afraid of being poor. Brother Yu was also very tenacious when it came to research. He would not retreat because there were too many people. He went over and squeezed with a bunch of people. Finally, someone squeezed in. This time he did not say anything. The others squeezed in with the blacksmith and miner. He went to the weapon shop and handed over a blue weapon that he had randomly gotten a few days ago. He took it out and asked the boss, but the boss still accepted it. The price was naturally the same as the system's usual high-quality item, treating it like trash. It completely ignored the value of the item in the players' hearts. It actually still accepts. Then all the players who got trash will still throw it into the shop. The system said that the NPC's currency is also limited. He is collecting equipment here, and the other side is collecting ores. How long can this continue? The system will keep giving them money? No matter how rich the system is, there will be a day when it runs out, right? After it runs out, it will refresh? Isn't this the same as returning to the original path? What's the difference from not refreshing? Brother Yu pondered again. The value of his blue weapon itself was not high. In addition to the current situation, it was not worth selling at all. The original boss wanted to accept it, so he handed it over. However, when he looked up again, the boss handed him the money and turned around to hang the equipment on the weapon rack. Fuck. Brother Yu was shocked. He hurriedly asked the boss how much it was selling for. When the boss reported the price, Brother Yu was shocked. When the system sold it again, it did not treat it as trash. Instead, it became more like a player's. This was clearly the original market price of the equipment. It was roughly converted after the update. There's actually such a move. Brother Yu tested another setting. He couldn't figure out what kind of situation this research would lead to. He just dropped a line in the mercenary channel with a heavy heart. It's hard to say what will happen with this update. What's wrong? Everyone hurriedly asked. Everyone was very concerned about this update. Brother Yu did not say anything. He showed everyone the black cold saw that he had just bought. Fuck, where did you get it? Everyone exclaimed. The few of them were very familiar with each other. They were very clear about what kind of equipment each of them had. For a purple equipment like the black cold saw, the production rate was very low. Not everyone had the chance to own a roadside item. Sometimes, even if you had the money, there was no market. I bought it from the system shop. Brother Yu told them about what happened. Fuck, there are still a few shops in the city. Let's go and take a look. Yutian Shinming jumped up. I just went to the weapon shop in Shi City again. I didn't see any purple equipment. But other than purple equipment, there are blue and gold equipment on sale in the weapon shop now. However, the quantity is very low. I tried to buy a blue equipment from the shop in Shi City. After I bought it, there was no new stock to replace it. Also, I sold a piece of blue equipment to him. Guess what? After the shop got it, he immediately put it up for sale. The price was the same as the goods he had in his hand. I've noticed these prices. I feel that it's more like the player's market. This isn't normal. The items sold by the system are at the same price as the players, and they're even selling exquisite equipment. I can't figure out what's going on. Brother Yu said. Brother Yu, you're really a player's body, but a GM's life is cheap. What does the crap you're worrying about have to do with you? If one parallel world falls, thousands of parallel worlds will stand up. You're a player, and you're afraid that you won't have games to play? If I had to say, this update is even better. We're all equipped with exquisite equipment, and have lots of gold coins. This is too much of an advantage. Let's seize the time and enjoy it. Han family young master looked down on Brother Yu again. I'll go to a few more system shops to take a look. Brother Yu didn't understand at all. He was born to worry. Everyone else was in the middle of a guild meeting, so they all started to get distracted and discuss the future of this update in the channel. Gu Fei would still interrupt a few times at first, but he gradually realized that his interruptions were just jokes and had nothing to do with the actual discussion, so he slowly shut up. The pre-war meeting on the side of the reborn Amethyst was as ridiculous as usual. They strayed away from the topic of the currency update. The girls counted how much food they had left, and Slender Waist Dance started to act generous again. Some of them didn't have much money, so she took the money pouch that Gu Fei gave her and stuffed gold coins into their hands. The girls understood her personality, so they all avoided her, but who was faster than her? In the end, they had no choice but to take a few even if they didn't want them. Slender Waist Dance returned the money as she called out. Don't be shy, everyone. Take some. If you don't have enough, ask Qianli. The girls weren't that shameless. It made Gu Fei feel awkward. Slender Waist Dance had already announced it, so how could he not do something? He had no choice but to carry a money pouch as if he was giving out food, grabbing a handful here and there. July watched as the two of them messed up the guild meeting like they were helping out refugees. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There was only so much information about the city war, and nothing much could be discussed. In the end, they decided to focus on the quest, but Gu Fei and Slenderwaist Dance could go kill the enemies. July asked the two if they needed a cleric. Gu Fei replied to Luo Luo over and over again. He shivered and shook his head. The players spent the next 2 days in a daze. The currency update had brought about a lifeless atmosphere in the market. Everyone only wanted to earn money, and no one dared to spend money carelessly. However, the taverns were still as crowded as ever. The price of wine had been cut by 10 times. The cheapest red wine now cost 2 coppers per glass. It would be too much to be reluctant to spend money. Gu Fei couldn't rest in peace these 2 days. The city war was imminent, and all the big guilds had their eyes on him, the current #1 expert. They thought of all sorts of ways to poach him. Other than the local guilds in Cloud City, some guilds that he didn't know from other places also sent letters to negotiate. Even drifting came to persuade him. Who knew where this guy had drifted off to? How did he join a guild again? He asked Gu Fei if he wanted to join him. Gu Fei was at a loss. The two of them were rivals last time, and they didn't have a good time. Why did this guy act as if nothing had happened and still wanted to join him? What was the meaning of this? Was he taking in underlings? Water Depth made a huge profit this time. He asked Gu Fei and was rejected. Then he tried to poach 100-era statesmen. 100-era statesmen didn't have a guild in the first place. Among the people he knew, only Water Depth wanted to poach him. Water Depth knew this guy's personality after hanging out with him for a few days. He directly said that the city war was coming, and he wanted him to temporarily join their guild and help them out. How could someone of 100 Lives Statecraft's character refuse? Of course, he agreed without hesitation. Gu Fei's first reaction when he heard this news was, shady. This guy from a studio is really shady. Luckily, 100-era statesmen didn't cooperate with the studio. Otherwise, he would definitely be sold and still be helping people earn money. Water Depth's advantage wasn't just this. Sword Demon also didn't have a guild. Water Depth said, "Don't be idle, come and help me out." Would Sword Demon refuse? Of course not. Water Depth got 2 great experts before the city war. According to the people in the guild, he would bump into trees when he walked recently. After he bumped into them, he would grin foolishly. There was no end to it. 2 days passed quickly. Gu Fei was annoyed. After being harassed for a long time, he turned off the message. But he had nothing to do these days. For the first time, there wasn't a single mission in the wanted mission office. How lonely was this world? Everyone was either thinking about making money or thinking about the city war 2 days later. They didn't even PK, which made Gu Fei worried. On the weekend, at 6 p.m., the game stopped for an hour for the final update before the city war. An hour later, the server opened on time. Players swarmed into the game. After their eyes lit up, all the players were surprised to find that they weren't in the familiar offline area. Everyone had been thrown outside the main city. That familiar main city was now thousands of meters away. They could vaguely see the closed city gates. Flags were fluttering on the city walls, and bugles sounded. The city war had officially begun. Chapter 663. The players looked around and realized that they were in a simple war camp. The system broadcast sounded at this time, announcing to all players. During the main city war, the main city will be temporarily closed. The 7 main resurrection points will be temporarily moved outside the city. The coordinates are XXX. During the main city war, players who do not participate in the main city war can continue to train in the wild. After death, players who participate in the main city war will not lose experience, will not lose levels, and will not lose equipment. After death, players will also resurrect at the 7 locations and can immediately participate in the main city war. The resurrection points have all kinds of supplies that players need. After the system broadcast finished, the players all over the world heard the nagging of the NPCs next to them. City Lord XXX, cruel rule, exploitation of the people. He tramples on our lives, exploits everything we have, suppresses our words and deeds, slaughters our brothers and sisters. We can't endure this anymore. Brothers and sisters, pick up the weapons in your hands and blow the horn to charge. Let us overthrow the dictatorship of City Lord XXX and build a future that belongs to us. The people who sang this were the NPC captains of the various barracks. Each of them was wearing shiny armor. When they sang the last sentence, they pulled out their long swords from their waists and pointed at the main city thousands of meters away. The players looked at each other. What was going on? It was like a peasant uprising. This city war actually had a story behind it. Of course, these words didn't have any effect on the players. Did the players have the time to care about him? The online teleportation was messed up by the system. At this time, they were all sending messages to find their own organizations. This was the most chaotic rebel army in history. The commander had already called for a charge, but the soldiers hadn't even found their own team. Coordinates XXX, I'm here. Everyone come. Gather, do you hear me? Hurry. Where's the flag? Who has the flag? Isn't it called the flag? Raise the flag. Follow the flag. Quest, there's a quest in the camp. I found a quest. The guild channel was even more chaotic than the scene. It was full of similar voices. Unsworn Sword, as the guild leader of the most powerful guild in Cloud City, was also completely dumbfounded. Usually, they felt that their guild could be said to be the tyrant of the city, but now that the entire city's guild was mobilized, they finally understood what people meant. In a main city with 500,000 players, how could a guild with a little more than 1,000 players possibly compare? For the first time, Unsworn Sword felt that his guild was so insignificant as he stared at the endless sea of heads that covered the mountains and plains. Level 6? What was a level 6? Even the 10 Societies Alliance in Moonlit Night City, with 4,000 people, was just a drop of water in front of such a formation. Unsworn Sword had never seen such a big scene before. Actually, what he saw in front of him was not enough for 500,000 people. There were 500,000 players in the city, but a significant portion of them didn't play in guilds. There were also some who had joined guilds but weren't interested in participating in the event. The guilds couldn't force them to join, and there were also those who didn't want to get involved in this mess, so they pretended that nothing had happened. In fact, if it weren't for the official promise that the points obtained from this event would be exchanged for experience points regardless of ranking. In short, participating in this event was much more worthwhile than leveling up. It was because of this rule that many players were able to stay in the game. In this chaotic situation, a large guild like Unhindered was actually a burden. After calling out to people for a long time, he didn't see anyone from his own guild come to his side. Perhaps there were. But frankly speaking, there were over 1,000 players in the guild, and Unsworn Sword didn't even know a third of them. The ones he was familiar with could be counted on his hands. If the guild leader was like this, then what about the members? There were many people in large guilds like them who didn't know each other. At this time on the plains, countless people from the same guild stood side by side, gazing into the distance wondering, where are the brothers from my own guild? When their gazes turned to the side, they glanced at the badge. Hey, we're on the same side. On the other hand, smaller guilds like Amethyst Reborn and Immortal Among Flowers moved quickly. Everyone in the guild was as close as a family, and they were very familiar with each other. Their numbers were small, and they gathered quickly. Amethyst Reborn's members who were online were already in place. July looked left and right, puzzled. Where's Qianli? They dropped the ball at a crucial time. Hurry up and call him. Slender Waist Dance shouted as she sent a message to Gu Fei. In the end, she received a system notification. Enemies are not allowed to communicate. Slender Waist Dance was obviously not the only one who sent a message to Gu Fei. At this time, July and Luoluo also received a private message, and they received the same reply. She looked up and saw the confusion on everyone else's face. What does this mean? What enemies? Luoluo asked. Is it referring to the city war? The enemy in the city war. Isn't that the city's defenders? Qianli is defending the city? The girls were in an uproar. What was going on? A top-notch expert was selected to defend the city. The system was cheating. Gu Fei was also at a loss at this moment, and he was extremely at a loss. When he went online, he appeared at the resurrection point as usual. He did not notice that there were no players around him. Because it was a city war, he wanted to gather with the girls, so he sent a message to ask where to meet. In the end, he received the system's reply. Enemies are not allowed to communicate. Gu Fei was confused, so he sent a message to Child Elite Group's channel, but the system's reply was the same. Gu Fei was puzzled. When he looked up again, he realized that the resurrection point was frighteningly quiet. Usually, no matter what time it was, the resurrection point would always be flashing with white light, and people would come and go almost without interruption. What was going on today? Why wasn't there a single person at such an important event? Gu Fei walked out of the knight's camp where he went offline, and was shocked. In the square in front of the knight's camp, a team of elite knights had already assembled. Gu Fei went forward to take a look, and recognized that they were NPCs, not players. He was puzzled. The system broadcast ended at this moment, and the captain of the team of knights was seen waving his sword. Warriors, there is a group of thugs trying to disrupt our peaceful lives. They have gathered a large number of troops, and are preparing to attack our city. Warriors, take up your weapons, defend your home, defend your honor, and protect your brothers and sisters. Come with me, and slay these thugs under our sword of justice. When Gu Fei heard this, he was completely dumbfounded. Wasn't this a main city attack? Why was he in the middle of a song about defending the main city? Why was he surrounded by NPCs? Where were the players? Where were the players? Gu Fei ran through a few streets, and did not see a single player. Instead, he saw system guards gathering and walking around. The system's formation was very different from usual. Other than the usual system guards, Gu Fei also saw a square formation of mages and priests. When he passed by the Thieves' Guild, he also saw a group of assassins. They didn't line up, speak, or boost morale like the warriors and knights. They just sat in silence, expressionless, and did not say a word. The NPC's performance of this kind of imposing manner was perfect. But in this silent face, Gu Fei saw a blank face, which made him feel a sense of familiarity. Sword Demon! Gu Fei shouted. Sword Demon hurriedly turned his head, and when he saw that it was Gu Fei, he was also excited. What's going on? Gu Fei walked over in a few steps. I didn't know what was going on at first, but now that I see you, I think the problem might be in our camps. Sword Demon said. Camps? Yes, because of our camps, we were divided into the system that guards the main city. Sword Demon said. What kind of explanation is this? I didn't see this announcement. Gu Fei said. How many people can there be in a camp? That's why the system didn't make a special announcement. Sword Demon said. If there's no special announcement, then we're considered normal people. Gu Fei said. Who knows what rules there are in this? Sword Demon said. Then what do we do now? Fight with hundreds of thousands of players? After saying this, Gu Fei suddenly became a little excited. This was fun. And he also heard the system announcement just now. Dying in a city battle didn't cause any losses, but equipment durability would drop. Gu Fei had always disregarded life and death when he piked himself, mainly because he didn't want to cause trouble for the players. If he didn't have this thought, why would he be so obsessed with the wanted quest? If he wanted to PK, wouldn't the streets be full of people? Wasn't apple vinegar made like this? Thinking of this, Gu Fei hurriedly said, then that apple vinegar and water-breaking arrow, aren't they also in the same camp? They've both dropped to level 40, but they still don't know. And even if they are, it's probably based on their residency, right? Sword Demon said. Then didn't you go to help Water Depth? Why didn't they send you to Forest Shade City? I don't have a residency there. I've been training here these past few days. Before I went offline, I just teleported to Forest Shade City. And then wasn't there a system maintenance? When I came back up, I was back here. I wanted to tell Water Depth, but the message couldn't be sent. Sword Demon said. You say there's only 2 of us defending the city. If we really defend the city, how do we split it? Shall we split it half? Gu Fei asked. That's impossible. Pay attention to the rules of the city battle announced by the system. In fact, it only says 10,000 points to divide the power area. In fact, it doesn't mention whether this city battle quest can be completed or failed. I think that maybe when the players kill 10,000 points, the city battle will be declared over. I think this city battle isn't so much an event, but an update for the players to participate. Through the players' participation, the main city will be divided in the hands of the players. Sword Demon analyzed. And I think your analysis is much more reliable than Brother Yu's. Gu Fei said. Brother Yu had been talking about money, the economy, circulation, the value of goods, and so on. He always had to pull people together to discuss. The other 5 members of the elite team were on the verge of breaking down. They all sent him to Jiannan's side. So this is a quest with no victory or defeat. It's just an update. I think the best is yet to come, Sword Demon said. What do you mean? After the division of the power area is finished, will it be passed down to the guild? I think that when the time comes, the corresponding rules will be introduced. This power area will be the main stage for the competition between guilds. Saying so much, then what are we going to do? Jump out of the city and fight with 500,000 people? Gu Fei said. I just received a quest. Sword Demon said. What quest? Assassination. The target is a player called White and Black. Who? The Black and White Alliance of Life and Death. Do you know? It's the guild leader. Sword Demon said. Oh. Gu Fei came to a realization. They want you to assassinate the enemy's commander. It seems like this group is also a suicide squad. When the time comes, they will specifically target the guild leader. Gu Fei looked at the silent group of assassins inside and outside the Thief Guild square. Sword Demon smiled bitterly. If they have a target, then they know where it is. What should I do? 500,000 people. Where am I going to find them? And I don't think there's a chance. Let's just charge up and kill randomly. Gu Fei was already eager to try. 500,000 people. Sword Demon sighed. In fact, he was reminding Gu Fei, I know you're fierce, but today's opponents aren't 5 or 15 people, but 500,000 people. It's a number that can defeat you with just one spit from each person. When are these guys going to make their move? When the time comes, we can mix in with the NPCs, Gu Fei said. I don't know. They've been sitting there for a long time, and they haven't said anything or moved, Sword Demon said. There are some moving around in the city. Let's follow them and take a look, Gu Fei suggested. Okay. Sword Demon nodded. The two left the Thief Guild. At the corner of the street, they saw a group of archers with bows strapped to their backs, valiantly setting off. The two hurriedly followed behind. Of course, the NPCs wouldn't pay attention to them. The two followed the group all the way to the guard tower at the corner of the city. They followed the stairs to the top of Cloud City. Then, they saw the group of archers line up and draw their bowstrings. Fuck. Gu Fei and Sword Demon cursed. This group of archers didn't intend to leave the city. It seemed like they were going to be stationed at the top of the city. It wasn't like players hadn't climbed the city wall before. At this time, it really wasn't the usual city wall for sightseeing. There were many archers and mages, 2 long-range professions on top of the city wall. Every 20 to 30 meters on the city wall, there were catapults. Gu Fei and Sword Demon walked closer to take a look. The stones that the catapult wanted to throw were piled up next to it. The head was bigger than a player. Gu Fei and Sword Demon tried to move it together, but they couldn't move it at all. Fuck. What level does a warrior have to be to move it? The system produced such a high-level character, and it's shameless. As Sword Demon said this, he saw a sturdy warrior guard run over. Gu Fei and Sword Demon waited to see how he would move the boulder. In the end, he didn't move it at all. He walked in front of the boulder pile, waved his sword and shouted, "Load the boulder!" Gu Fei and Sword Demon waited to see the coolie. In the end, a white light flashed on the boulder pile and a stone was gone. The catapult's ladle had a stone lying steadily on it. The two of them had tears streaming down their faces. What was there to be serious about with the system? He didn't move it at all and directly refreshed it. After visiting the top of the city wall, they looked down at the bottom. Thousands of meters away were the two of them's true friends, the players. Sword Demon looked for a while and frowned. Why is it so messy? About half an hour had passed, and the chaos outside the city was still there. Many people hadn't found where their guild was yet. Everyone vented their resentment on the system. Why was it randomly refreshing? It was such a mess. They couldn't even find the people, so what was the point of the city battle? At the beginning of the city battle, the system soldiers made declarations and oaths, but the players were so disrespectful. Gu Fei and Sword Demon watched as the stones on the city wall were loaded. The archers' arrows were counted, the mages' fruits were enough, and the melee profession's assault team was neatly assembled at the city gate. Even the assassins who came out of the Thieves' Guild had dispersed from the front of the Thieves' Guild's courtyard, hiding in some unknown corner. As two players who had personally witnessed the scene inside and outside the city, Gu Fei and Sword Demon agreed that if the system didn't go easy on them, the players wouldn't be able to take down the main city at all. From this, they were even more convinced of Sword Demon's inference. The system's activity was just a formality, so it wasn't very serious. The players went online and refreshed randomly, and the two lonely faction players were ignored and directly thrown into the city. Anyway, it didn't look like a carefully planned major activity. The two of them were feeling melancholy. Gu Fei suddenly pointed in a certain direction. Look over there. Sword Demon looked in the direction he was pointing. It was also a black mass of players. He didn't know what was special at all and asked curiously, "What are you looking at?" "Look, that flag. Do you see it?" Gu Fei continued to point. Sword Demon continued to be confused. "Which flag? There are so many flags." "That black and white flag, is that the guild flag of the Black and White Life and Death Alliance that you mentioned?" Gu Fei said. "Oh, it might be true. Where there's a flag, the guild leader is probably around. Do you know that person?" Gu Fei asked. "Not really, but I can recognize him when I see him," Sword Demon said. "Let's do it." Gu Fei was excited. Although it was PK with a purpose was always more interesting than meaningless killing. If they really jumped into the sea of people and killed, it would be quite boring. It was like a race. The finishing line was drawn in front of them, and they would win if they reached it. The other side didn't even know where the finishing line was. What was the point of running and running? Going now isn't courting death. "Let's wait and see and wait for the players to move," Sword Demon said. "I think your mission is actually quite convenient. When you join the crowd, people don't care which guild you're from. They see you as a person and treat you as a comrade. How would they know that we're from the system?" Gu Fei said. "The key is to find the person," Sword Demon said. "Keep an eye on that big flag," Gu Fei said. "I should have borrowed the binoculars," Sword Demon muttered. The binoculars were now in the hands of the Han family young master. A few days ago, he dealt with the boundless wilderness. When the girl wanted it, he returned it. As a result, a few days before the city war, this guy went to borrow it again. To live eternally among the flowers in the vast wilderness, there was no strategic goal, so he lent it to him again. At this time, the Han family young master was holding the binoculars to observe the main city. As he watched, he froze. He put down the binoculars and rubbed his eyes. He looked at the wine bottles on the ground around him. "Did I drink too much? Impossible." The Han family young master thought and raised the binoculars again. This time, he finally confirmed that it was Gu Fei and Sword Demon who disappeared before the city war. How did these two guys suddenly appear on the city wall? Butterfly knot. The city war has officially begun. Chapter 664. Gu Fei and Sword Demon's disappearance, and their messages were, "Enemies are not allowed to communicate with each other." This spread throughout their circle of friends. Water Depth messaged the Child Elite Group's members one by one. Amethyst also asked them what was going on. But how would the Child Elite Group's members know? They only found out about it when they heard the guild that these two guys were affiliated with Ask. They all sent messages to test it out. Sure enough, it was the case. They were clearly online, but they couldn't contact them. These two had the same disappearance situation, so naturally there should be a common reason. Others might not be able to analyze anything, but the members of the Young Master's elite group were able to come to a conclusion faster than Gu Fei and the Sword Ghoul. The biggest similarity between the two was that they both belonged to the same faction. But even if they had a faction, where did they go? No one could say for sure. In the end, they could only continue to do their own things and wait for the city war to end before they would know. In the end, Han family young master was observing the enemy through his binoculars when he saw these two people. Han family young master also turned his head out of habit to find someone to talk to. In the end, when he turned his head, he realized that this was a guild activity. The people that he usually looked down on were not by his side. Han family young master was helpless and could only speak in the channel. What about on top of the city wall? How did those two guys get there? The channel immediately exploded with activity. If they're in the city, then they're the enemy. Could it be that the players with a faction are considered the system's forces? Brother Yu immediately deduced. The system didn't make such an announcement. Announcement my ass. The system said that only a few people know about factions. Is there a need to make an announcement? As they discussed, they couldn't contact Gu Fei and Sword Demon. As they talked, they began to discuss the guild's situation again. Wushang, what are you guys doing over there? Yutian Shenming inquired. What else can we do? Charge with our lives. Unscathed in battle said. Rough. A bunch of uncouth people. They just can't play with any skill. Yutian Shenming said in disdain. Unscathed in battle's guild was called Warriors' Home, a group of warriors. Of course, such a guild wouldn't amount to much. In fact, its nature was similar to small guilds like Amethyst Rebirth and Immortal Among Flowers. It was just a group of like-minded players gathered together. However, there were still plenty of experts in this guild. A guild like this would naturally have a different mindset when it came to a city war. Unscathed in battle immediately snorted at Yutian Shenming. You've grown up. You've gathered another group of people to ambush us, haven't you? The Four Seas Arrow Array was already very famous in the Cloud City. TSK, I don't have anything in common with you. Yutian Shenming expressed his disdain for talking to people from inferior guilds. He turned around and asked, Gongzi, what about you guys? I don't talk to people with low IQ, Han family young master said. Ha 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 ha, that's right, me too. Unscathed in battle laughed. Yutian Shenming was extremely depressed. At this time, the small and medium guilds had already gathered. Large guilds like Sweeping Four Seas and Singing to Wine were also more or less done. Ever since Han family young master discovered the two on top of the wall, he hadn't put down his binoculars. He wanted to see what these two could do in the city. On top of the wall, Gu Fei and Sword Demon noticed the black and white flags and focused their attention there. Black and White Alliance of Life and Death could be considered a rising star in Cloud City. They were already level 5. Although they couldn't compare to Sweeping Four Seas and Singing to Wine, which were full of experts and elites, they still had a lot of talent. With such a rule in this city war, the ones who were the happiest were the medium-sized guilds. The small guilds were extremely lacking in manpower. Under these rules, they couldn't compete with the big guilds. However, for the medium-sized guilds, under these rules, with careful planning and luck, they might be able to compete with the big guilds. In the end, they could get a good ranking, which would greatly benefit their future operations. The player base of the parallel world was large. If you really wanted to develop a guild, you didn't lack people. What you lacked was talent. For example, if a guild had a top 5 or top 10 player, it would be a golden signboard. However, as the level gap was getting closer, the top 5 or top 10 players were no longer that popular. So what if they were top 5 or top 10? They were the same level as you. They weren't that strong. In everyone's eyes, the talent had to be famous in the game and had done something great. For example, Qianli Drunk. This person wasn't top 5 or top 10. Who could be better than him? There was also Slender Waist Dance. Although he wasn't top 5, so what? The number 1 pay-to-win player, he could PK you to death with money. Who would dare to not recognize such an expert? However, such an expert could only be found by chance. Therefore, many guild leaders were developing new ideas. Since they couldn't find a legendary person to join their guild, they would make their own guild into a legend. Starting from this line of thought, there were many ways to do things. Clothing, food, housing, and transportation were all taken care of by people. For example, when going out, everyone wore a scarlet cloak. This was a way to reflect the personality of the group. However, this way of expression was only a symbol. It couldn't reflect the inner nature of the guild. Hence, After the news of this city war was announced, many guilds had passed down orders to their subordinates to display their style and standards in this city war. They wanted to become the most eye-catching guilds in the city war and leave an unforgettable impression in everyone's eyes. The guiding spirit was always very empty. The words were reasonable, but there was no mention of how to do it. Now that the city war was imminent, many guilds were thinking about style and standard in their hearts. However, they didn't know what style and standard was. The Black and White Life and Death Alliance was one of these guilds. However, the guiding principle was slightly clearer. The guild leader, White and Black, proposed, "In this city war, we have to be like a sharp knife. We will stab wherever we point and always tear a gap in the enemy's line of defense because of us." The guild members carefully studied this strategy, and one of the warriors who had defected to the House of Warriors was depressed to find that this strategy was very similar to his original guild strategy when it came to team battles, but they only had 2 words: charge. At this time, the sun was shining brightly. Under the black and white flag, the guild leader, White and Black, was complacent. White and Black was a warrior. His equipment was made according to his name. This was what he had thought of when he named himself. Originally, he was wearing a silver-white armor and a pitch-black cloak. However, a few days ago, he received a pair of boots and a belt. The attributes were quite good, but it just had to be black. It was very eye-catching when he wore it on his body. White and Black was very depressed. He wanted to find someone to make these 2 pieces of equipment white. However, experts pointed out that it was easy to make white if you want to make black, but there was no such technology in the game. White and Black was anxious, worried, and pulled out his hair. He wanted to be pure white and black. Now that he had 2 black pieces of equipment on him, what should he do? Later, this kid had an idea. These 2 pieces of equipment were of the highest quality. He couldn't bear to not use them, but he exchanged all the other parts of his body that could be exchanged. For this, White and Black did not hesitate to pay a high price to buy or exchange. He forcefully exchanged all his other equipment for black. Then the entire cloak was white, and White and Black became pure white and black. In the end, after 2 days of happiness, the system was updated. The currency was updated, and White and Black were no longer pure. All day long, his equipment was black, his little face was pale, and he wanted to kick anyone he saw. At this time, the city war had already begun. White and Black was still unhappy because of his personal economic losses. After proposing a guiding principle, he stood under the flag with a gloomy face and did not speak, waiting for the others to gather. At this time, the entire guild was almost gathered. The vice-guild leader moved in front of White and Black. This guy was White and Black's close friend. He knew that the guild leader was in a bad mood recently, so he didn't say much and directly asked, "Everyone is here, where do we go?" White and Black looked into the distance. Apart from the city, there was not a single ghost a kilometer away. No enemies had appeared yet, so it was probably impossible to go to the wall. So he shook his head. "Don't be anxious, let's see. How is Unhindered and the others?" The vice-guild leader was very happy. The big guilds have been thrown into chaos by the refresh. They still haven't gathered everyone. "Humph. Don't they know how to make a flag?" White and Black said. "They did, but it's not as bright as our black and white flag. It's bright, and has a strong visual impact." The vice-guild leader was quite eloquent. "Guild leader, there's a situation." As the 2 were bragging, a sharpshooter member flew over and pointed in the direction of the Cloud City gate. The players never knew that the gate of the main city actually had a gate. They always thought it was a hole, but because of the city war, it had a gate. At this time, the sound of the mechanism at the gate was so loud that it hurt the eardrums of the players a kilometer away. The 4 city gates in the 4 directions of the Cloud City opened in one breath. System guards in bright uniforms stepped out of the city gates and lined up outside the city. The noisy group of players watched on, and gradually, they quietened down. This was a scene that they had never seen since they entered the game. Even when they were fighting monsters in the leveling area, the monsters were scattered all over the place. Even if they were in a pile, they would only be in groups of 3 to 5. When had there ever been thousands of them, and they were lined up so neatly? In comparison, the players looked at themselves. Their team was a mess, with all sorts of equipment. Compared to the uniform and orderly formation of the others, they were like refugees fleeing from a famine. They were being suppressed by the momentum of the system. Who knew which guild leader first returned to reality, and even set a military strategy? Attack halfway through. Brothers attack. The guild leader was also a warrior, and he held a long-handled spear that most warriors didn't like to use. This kind of weapon would be even more majestic if it was ridden by a horse. But at this time, it was stabbed into the ground, and that guy was half a person tall, so it couldn't be used horizontally or vertically. Plus, these otakus were addicted to online games all day long. How many of them had decent figures? They weren't worthy of this ultimate general's weapon at all. Therefore, not many people in the game could hold a long-handled weapon that looked stylish. The warrior guild leader was no exception. He was short and fat. It would have been fine if he had just been holding a sword, but now that he was holding a spear, it made people feel that there must be a hidden race in the game. Otherwise, why would there be a dwarf? This dwarf general set a military strategy, waved his spear, and was the first to rush out. In the midst of thousands of troops, his appearance was extremely eye-catching. He was followed by a small soldier who held a large flag high. Everyone looked up and saw a spear and a flower drawn on the flag. Those who knew had already revealed that this was the guild spear and rose. The players were speechless. Everyone saw the spear. Was this bastard hinting that he was a rose? In the end, another insider revealed that the name of the guild leader of Spear and Rose was Black Rose. Damn, so shameless. The players were all furious. This kind of person was actually the first to come out among the heroes of Cloud City. The whole city's face was lost. Everyone's morale was immediately boosted. The guild leaders all pulled out their weapons and were about to call for their own guilds to fight when suddenly, a muffled sound came from the distance. Then they saw an object fly up from the top of the city wall, coming closer and closer. Just as everyone was watching in a daze, the object flew in a perfect arc and landed lightly on the ground. Dust was kicked up several stories high, and Black Rose and his flag had disappeared. When the dust settled, the flag-carrying soldier slammed the boulder and stamped his feet. Guild leader, how did you disappear just like that? The players all sucked in a breath of cold air. They didn't expect the system to have such a heavy weapon. When this stone fell, there was no need to talk about attack or defense. If it still didn't kill him, the players all felt bad. The morale of the soldiers was once again smashed by this stone. Everyone stopped talking about the charge, and quietly looked at the walls of the Cloud City. However, this catapult was installed at the back. It was obvious that it was to prevent the people below from directly destroying it. This way they couldn't see the whole picture, so they could only guess. Among them, only the Han family young master could see clearly. Not only did he recognize the catapult, but he also saw that Gu Fei and Sword Demon were busy with something before the catapult suddenly fired. On the city wall, Gu Fei and Sword Demon were also stunned. The two saw that the NPC on the city wall didn't care about them. The catapults were all loaded with stones, so they wanted to test if they could operate it. In the end, they tried to get on the machine, but the NPC still didn't care. They completely treated the two as their own people. Sword Demon immediately pulled the trigger of the catapult, and the cannon flew out just like that. God, it's really accurate. You have some skill. Gu Fei exclaimed. What happened? What happened? Sword Demon quickly ran over. He had just run to the back to fire the cannon, so he didn't have time to see what the cannon looked like. A person just rushed out and you killed him with a stone. What, you didn't mean it? Gu Fei asked. That position can't even see the city. Sword Demon said. Really? Then he's too unlucky. Who was it? He was killed so easily. It couldn't be Wuxia, right? Gu Fei said. Sword Demon usually came and went like a lonely swordsman, but he was quite familiar with the guilds in Cloud City. He looked at the big flag next to the boulder and said, No, this is the Spear and Rose Guild. Wuxia isn't from this guild. Each guild's flag was made very big. At this distance, people wouldn't be able to recognize it, but recognizing the flag wasn't a problem. How do you know about all the guilds? Gu Fei was curious about this question. Sword Demon laughed. They all looked for me. Gu Fei suddenly understood. Sword Demon was a top expert. He didn't have a guild, so how could these guilds not try to rope him in? It seemed like they had interacted before. With Sword Demon's kindness, people who had interacted with him wouldn't forget him. With your cannon, no one would dare to move. Gu Fei said. Just now, they saw that the players were ready to rush, but after Sword Demon's cannon, they were all stunned. Under the city, the two armies confronted each other. No one went forward. They only saw a huge boulder in the middle of the field, a big flag, and a small player who was at a loss. What should we do? How do we sneak out of the city? Just now, Gu Fei and Sword Demon discussed it. They wanted to wait for the battle royale between the system and the players to start. Then, they would sneak into the battlefield and find a way to complete Sword Demon's mission. Their plan was, the system regarded them as one of their own, so they definitely wouldn't make a move. The players didn't know that there were two traitors among them, so when they saw them, they wouldn't treat them as enemies. This way, as long as they knew where the white and black players were, wouldn't it be easy to approach them? Even if they weren't from the same guild, this was a big battle royale. It was completely normal for other players to approach them. In the end, on a whim, they played with the catapult and killed a player with one shot. This scared the others so much that they didn't dare to move. Indeed, that huge boulder was too shocking. If it had been thrown into the crowd just now, at least 5 or 6 people would have been killed. Right now, the players didn't dare to move, but the system guards were guarding the city. It seemed like they didn't plan to take the initiative to attack. Once they exited the gate, they lined up in a row, waiting for the players to come up and steal points. Otherwise, if they all defended the city, the players wouldn't have any tools. How could they attack the city? Sigh, we've wasted time. Sword Demon was extremely regretful. He wanted to kill the white and black players as soon as possible and complete a few more missions. Although the two of them didn't understand what was going on here, they guessed that as long as they did something, there should be rewards. Therefore, Sword Demon was still quite active in making enemies of the players. Anyway, there wasn't even a punishment if they died, so what was there to be afraid of? Just as the two of them were feeling depressed, they suddenly heard a burst of battle cries from a certain direction. Gu Fei tilted his head to listen and suddenly said with joy, "Hey! The west gate has started charging." There were 4 directions to the city. The boulder had hit one side, and at least half of the players didn't know. If they didn't know, they naturally wouldn't be scared. Moreover, the number of guards coming out of the 4 gates was exactly the same. While they were trying to scare one side, the other side couldn't help but attack. Once the other side started charging, the players on the other side started to panic. If they didn't go up, then all the points would be taken by the bastards from the west gate. Thinking about this, the guild leaders were pumped up again. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws. Kill, kill, charge! Kill! Everyone shouted in unison. This time, no one complained about the noise. When everyone heard the shouts of their own side, they felt as if they had suddenly leveled up by 10 levels. One by one, they rushed forward, striving to be the first to do so. Gu Fei and Sword Demon were staring at the black and white flag. White and Black originally wanted to make use of the city war to increase the guild's reputation. Adding on the fact that they had just been cheated by the currency update, they were extremely hostile towards the system. As soon as they charged forward, they immediately gave the order, and the entire guild began to move. Gu Fei looked and said, "This black and white flag is moving really slowly." Sword Demon smiled. White and Black is a warrior. The black and white flag is moving slowly, which means that the flag is following him. Okay, then follow the flag and charge. After Gu Fei said this, he jumped down from the top of the city wall. Damn, I can't do this. Sword Demon was extremely depressed and could only climb the stairs. The walls of the main city weren't just an average height. Gu Fei's flying hooks weren't enough. Chapter 665. Gu Fei now had the teleportation skill, so he dared to jump from any height as long as he controlled the distance and moved well. The Sword Demon didn't have this ability, so he could only obediently run down the stairs. This took up a lot of time, and the players outside the city approached the main city with large strides. The previous rock was caused by Gu Fei and the Sword Demon, so it didn't represent the system's attitude. Now that the players were about to reach the foot of the city, the system finally took action. The archers, mages, and catapults on the city wall suddenly moved together. The system knew all the skills and spells that the players knew. And the system knew all the skills and spells that the players didn't know. The arrows that filled the sky looked the same, but the visual effects of the spells were obvious. Ice, fire, thunder, and lightning were all greeting down. Apart from heaven's flaming wheel and flaming tree, 1,000 layers of flames, where else had the players seen other area of effect spells? In front of the west corner of the city, ice knives suddenly fell from the sky, and the players on the ground all turned blue. They had been frozen. The east corner of the city was filled with thunder and lightning. A pillar of light hit the ground, and electric sparks flew everywhere. The players who had been hit by spells all became conductors. The electric current ran from one body to another, and the chain of lightning was connected endlessly. The people in the center were even more depressed. This was the area where the catapult's firepower was concentrated. Those who had been hit by spells on the east and west sides were better off. Those who had been hit by the cold and electricity didn't die on the spot. The priests were more diligent, and many people were rescued. However, those in the center were helpless. When the big rock fell, they couldn't even see people on the spot. What was the point of rescuing them? However, after the rock fell, it became a good cover. The other ashen-faced players all hid behind these rocks. This wave of long-range attacks alone made the players throw their helmets and abandon their armor. For a moment, everyone forgot that the system still had melee professions like warriors and knights lined up outside the city wall. The wave of attacks on the city wall stunned the players, and these teams suddenly rushed forward and began to harvest the bewildered players. The players' previous rush was based on impulse, and they weren't prepared. Speaking of which, he didn't know how to prepare. He didn't even know what method the system would use. In the first round, the players at the north, south, east, and west gates had been beaten to the point that they had to run everywhere. Even the guild leader couldn't stop his troops, and he himself was scared out of his wits. His guild leader had experienced large-scale PvP battles in the game, but he had never participated in such a large-scale battle involving hundreds of thousands of players. With just a glance, he almost forgot what his guild emblem looked like. Gu Fei didn't move after flying down the wall. On one hand, he was waiting for the Sword Demon. On the other hand, he wanted to wait for the system and the players to start fighting so that the two of them could enter and fish in troubled waters. Who would have thought that this scene of a chaotic battle didn't happen at all? The players simply collapsed at the first touch. No matter how good an expert bragged about himself, it was no use at this time. The spells and the big stones were thrown down. Even the quick-witted ones couldn't dodge them even if they wanted to. There were people around them, and they all became obstacles. This battle was terrible. Gu Fei couldn't bear to watch any longer. He reckoned that he wouldn't be any better off if he were among the players. In this kind of situation, there was no room for individual skills to be displayed. Both sides were restricted. At this time, the Sword Demon also hurriedly ran down the city wall and came out through the city gate. Gu Fei was waiting for him outside the gate. The Sword Demon ran out and asked, "Where are White and Black and the others?" "White and Black. They're long gone," Gu Fei said. The Sword Demon had just run away from the city, so he didn't see the players being bullied miserably. Now he saw deserters all over the ground. There was no way to find White and Black. Most of the flags that the players raised had fallen. They were all running for their lives. Even if they didn't throw the flags away, they would be in their pockets. Who would still hold them in their hands? What's going on? The Sword Demon was at a loss. When he came down from the top of the wall, the scene in his memory was that the players were charging forward with an indomitable will. How did it become like this when he got down the city wall and out the door? He really couldn't understand. The system's attack turned them into this. Gu Fei shook his head. The system really focused on defending the city. After charging for a distance, it stopped and retreated, giving the players a chance to breathe. The players quickly counted their troops when they were free. The guild leaders who hadn't died were all nervously asking a question. Where did they revive? Is it near? It can't be randomly spawning again, right? The system answered this time. The players who died were all revived at the nearest revival point, so they could return to the team as quickly as possible. The blow they received this time was much more severe than when Black Rose was smashed to death by a flying boulder. All the players were dejected. At first, they were still thinking that they could hold their heads high in the city war, but now they didn't dare to make a sound. The various guilds began to hold emergency meetings. Many guild leaders realized that if they continued to treat each other as competitors in the face of such a powerful enemy that they had never seen before, they might not be able to reap any benefits if they continued to fight on their own. The first to set an example was the guild leader of Against the Current. Against the Current. Against the Current was now one of the 5 roaches. In terms of individual appeal, it was even higher than the most powerful guild, reigning the 4 seas. At this time he took the initiative to send a message to Unsworn Sword to express his goodwill. He suggested that the 2 guilds should set an example, cooperate sincerely, and lead all the guilds in Cloud City to fight the system together. Unsworn Sword was actually discussing this matter with the brothers around him. He also wanted to be the leader, but he didn't expect Against the Current to react so quickly. Before they could finish discussing, Against the Current had already made a move. Unsworn Sword wasn't willing to give up the limelight, but he also knew that this wasn't the time to be sulking. After weighing the pros and cons, he could only accept Against the Current's suggestion. Guild leader Unsworn, you're such a straightforward person. Then let's do this. Let's all meet up and discuss which city gate you guys are at. Against the Current asked. North Gate. What about you guys? Unsworn Sword replied. We're at the West Gate. This isn't a problem. Let's just meet up. Since guild leader Unsworn has agreed to cooperate, I'll call up some other guilds. Against the Current said. How can we trouble you alone? I'll go call up the others as well. Unsworn Sword hurriedly said. The parallel world didn't have a public channel that could be used in the world. So, they could only communicate privately. Obviously, if Against the Current were to call up the masses, they would naturally put their guild in the leading position. Unsworn Sword wouldn't let him monopolize this lucrative position, so he naturally had to be the one to call up the masses. His words would naturally put reigning the 4 seas in the leading position. The 2 of them had a tacit understanding on this matter, so they didn't say much and went to do their own things. However, Against the Current being able to call up Unsworn Sword first proved that he was a step faster. It was just sending a message, so he didn't need to visit them one by one. So when he called up Unsworn Sword, he also sent the message to the other guild leaders at the same time. There were currently 5 level 6 guilds in Cloud City. Against the Current was one of them, and the other 4 were also contacting each other. Unsworn Sword always felt that they were the best, so they should be the leader. In fact, which guild didn't have the same thought? When Against the Current called out, all the other guilds had the same thought. As a result, other than Against the Current, all 4 of them were contacting each other. Unsworn Sword had just sent a message to the 2 of them when he received the same message from 3 other guilds. Only then did he realize that these guilds had already communicated with Against the Current. These guys were the same as him, still foolishly trying to snatch the initiative from Against the Current. These 4 guilds had the time to go against the flow and continue contacting the lower and middle guilds. Unsworn Sword and the others didn't want to be left behind. For a moment, the lower and middle guild leaders were at a loss. Suddenly, all 5 guild leaders of Cloud City sent messages asking for cooperation. What was going on? In the current situation, cooperation was a must, but which guild should they cooperate with to get the most benefits? They had to wait and see. These lower and middle guild leaders didn't know that the 5 guilds had already formed an alliance. Now that the 5 guilds were fighting each other for the first position, the lower and middle guilds thought that the 5 guilds were competing with each other. For a moment, they were weighing which guild to cooperate with. After a long time, they finally came to their senses and laughed. No one pointed it out. Then they organized the guild leaders to meet and have the first guild leader conference of Cloud City. The 5 guild leaders were Unsworn Sword of Unsworn 4 Seas, Against the Current of Singing to Wine, Unchung Mutsu of Herding Clouds, Gu Xiaoshang of Between the Rosy Clouds, and Black Index Finger of Black Hand. Unsworn Four Seas and Against the Current of Singing to Wine were originally a conference, so they were on par with each other. Later on, Unsworn Four Seas received the competition's reward quest, and became the first guild to rise to level 6. Against the Current of Singing to Wine leveled like crazy at that time, and became one of the 5 roaches. At the same time, he led his guild to level 6 through his own hard work. He wasn't far behind Unsworn Four Seas. On the other hand, Herding Clouds was originally a level 4 guild compared to the other 2 level 5 guilds. They had always lost to the other 2 guilds. Now that they had risen to level 6, there was still a gap between level 41 and level 41. In terms of guild reputation, they weren't on the same level as the other 2 guilds. On the other hand, Rosy Clouds was even worse. They were originally a level 3 guild, but they were able to rise to level 6 thanks to Unsworn Four Seas' help. Everyone in Cloud City knew that Unsworn Sword had been chasing after Gu Xiaoshang to no avail. Black Hand Alliance, on the other hand, was founded by the Black Hand Mercenary Group, the #1 mercenary group in Cloud City. After losing to the 6-man child elite group in the mercenary group competition, the Black Hand Mercenary Group lost all face. They felt that they wouldn't be able to erase this shadow even if they developed a mercenary group, so they decided to become a guild. They started late, but they developed very quickly. They were one step ahead of Rosy Clouds and reached level 6. Those who had paid attention to them said that the Black Hand Alliance was already a level 3 guild when they first appeared. After a few days, they rose to level 4. Everyone guessed that they had purchased a guild from another player. A guild's name wasn't like a player's ID. It could be changed. Other small and medium-sized guilds couldn't do much on their own, so they would rely on the 5 major guilds. These 5 major guilds each had their own advantages. In terms of member strength, Unsworn Four Seas was the strongest. In terms of guild leader prestige, Against the Current was the strongest. In terms of connections, no one dared to look down on Black Index Finger. This guy came from a mercenary group, and the Black Hand Mercenary Group had a good reputation. After operating in Cloud City for so long, he had made a lot of friends. The guild leader of Rosy Clouds, Gu Xiaoshang, was a girl. This was also an advantage. For example, if you wanted Unsworn Sword to join a guild, he would definitely join. In the end, Muyun, a veteran guild, felt that it was more mediocre. Unsworn Sword could see that Against the Current was using this opportunity to push singing and drinking to the throne of the #1 guild in Cloud City. He didn't want Against the Current to succeed. At this time he wasn't too worried. In his opinion, among the 5 major guilds, other than Against the Current, the other 3 guilds would probably side with him. Gu Xiaoshang was needless to say. Although Unsworn Sword didn't succeed after chasing after him for so long, he still had some friendship with him, and it was still better than Against the Current. As for Black Index Finger, during the Unsworn Four Seas mission, most of the mercenary groups withdrew. Black Index Finger died, but the mercenary group still kept their promise. Unsworn Sword was very grateful for this. After returning to Cloud City, both sides had a good relationship. As for Unchung Mutsu, this guy didn't have any friendship with Unsworn Sword, but the problem was that he didn't have any friendship with Against the Current either. It wasn't a secret in Cloud City that these two didn't get along. Thinking about this, Unsworn Sword felt that Against the Current was really a bad move. What's the use of hooking up with these 3 guild leaders? These people are all friends with me, so why wouldn't they stand on my side? Reflection of Years and Windstar agreed with Unsworn Sword's opinion. At this time, the location of the Guild Leader Conference had already been decided. Unsworn Sword brought 2 people to attend the conference. This guy was a warrior, so he walked slowly. When he arrived at the conference, there were already many people there. Unsworn Sword glanced around and found the 4 guild leaders first. Because the 4 of them were in the center, the other small and medium-sized guild leaders were sitting around them. Unsworn Sword coughed twice. When the people around him saw him, they immediately moved to the side. This subconscious gesture of inviting him to sit in the middle made Unsworn Sword feel extremely satisfied. Guild Leader Unsworn, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Against the Current was quite enthusiastic. Sorry, my legs are short. Unsworn Sword smiled. Before you came, we discussed it casually. Everyone agreed that since we're going to cooperate, there needs to be a unified leader. We've already decided on the candidate, and it's you, Guild Leader Unsworn. Don't be shy, we've already decided. We just wanted to inform you, so you have to obey the majority. Ha ha ha. Going against the current. What a hearty laugh. This caused Unsworn Sword to feel very confused. What was going on? This guy actually took the initiative to give up the position of the leader to him? Could it be that this guy also saw the situation clearly like me, and knew that he couldn't compete with me? So he took the initiative to give up the position to show his style, and continue to increase his personal charisma? Countless thoughts flashed through Unsworn Sword's mind. Reflection of years nudged him and sent him a message. Han family young master. Unsworn Sword's heart skipped a beat when he heard the name. He looked in the direction Reflection of years nudged him, and saw the cleric casually sitting on a wooden stump behind against the current. Only half of his body was exposed. In his hand was never a staff, but a bottle of wine. Although he had no grudges with the child elite group and had a good impression of them, Han family young master was still a demon in everyone's eyes. Extortion, trap, sarcasm. Unsworn Sword's heart trembled when he thought of it. He immediately replied to Reflection of years' message. Oh, I forgot, this guy is someone who sings while drinking. Damn it, do you think we've fallen into a trap again? Let's be polite first. Reflection of years said. Unsworn Sword immediately smiled. Guild leader against the current, you're one of the 5 roaches, the top figure in our Cloud City. I think you should be the commander. He, against the current, laughed. I'd like to, but no one agrees. Unsworn Sword still wanted to say something, but Gu Xiaoshang glared at him. Just do it. What are you pretending for? Annoying. As soon as the girl he liked spoke, Sword Without Oath didn't even care about the opinion of the dog-headed strategist. He immediately displayed his manliness and laughed out loud. Since everyone has said so, I have no choice but to accept it. Reflection of years and Feng Xing were helpless. Their brother was always like this in front of Gu Xiaoshang. Alright, let's discuss how we're going to fight this battle. Against the current said. Unsworn Sword smiled and said. I've just arrived. Let me see who my brothers are first. Although Unsworn Sword said that he was looking for a brother, in reality, he was looking for a sister. When he saw the young master of the Han family, he suddenly realized that it was not enough to just keep an eye on the movements of these guilds. How could he not rope in a powerful person like Thousand Miles Drunk? This guy was a reincarnated amethyst. Where was the reincarnated amethyst? Were they here? Purple Crystal Rebirth was a small, insignificant guild. They weren't in Sworn Sword's friend list, so he didn't try to recruit them. At this time he didn't know if anyone from the guild had come, and it wasn't appropriate to ask openly. He hoped that he was the only one who noticed Thousand Miles Drunk, who had been holding the fort for a while, so he wanted to do it secretly. In the end he didn't see anyone from Amethyst, so he sent a message to Reflection of Years and Feng Xing. Did you see Qianli's drunk? The two of them didn't reply. Sword of Unsworn had also finished his round. He hurriedly smiled and said, We're all old friends. Alright, let's plan this. Against the current nodded and said, We just did a head count. We have a total of 820 guilds here, with over 170,000 guild members. How do you think we should fight, guildless? Damn, you're waiting for me. Unsworn Sword screamed in his mind. He was just a player. 1,000 guild members was already his limit. Now that 170,000 people had come, who knew what to do? Unsworn Sword suddenly realized that being the boss today wasn't easy. Chapter 666. Most of the players were just commoners. Commanding 170,000 people to fight was something that had never happened before. Not to mention the players, even if it was a random officer from the army. How many of them could have so many subordinates? The number of people in one army group was about 60,000. 170,000 people was equivalent to the strength of 3 army groups. How to fight? Anyone in the game would be dumbfounded if they asked this question. Unsworn Sword snatched this false reputation, but he knew that it was hard to get off. Of course, he could say that everyone would discuss it, but discussion was just a group effort. If no one said anything, wouldn't he have to make the decision himself in the end? This was just a game. If the tactician couldn't come up with an idea, you couldn't threaten them with their heads. Let's figure out the system's strategy first, then think of a way to deal with it. Unsworn Sword saw that he was waiting for him to speak, so he had no choice but to say something. Then he looked at the reflection of time. Reflection of years usually had a lot of ideas, but he didn't dare to take responsibility for commanding 170,000 people to PK. He could see that Countercurrent's move was very vicious, pushing Unsworn Sword to this position. 170,000 people PK, this was definitely something that no one could come up with. In the end, would Unsworn Sword still have to come up with a plan? But how much could Unsworn Sword know? In the end, the idea he came up with was probably no different from not coming up with anything. Then the players would go into battle, collapse and complain. Who would be the target of their complaints? Of course, it would be their commander, Unsworn Sword. If the guild leader was looked down upon, how good could the guild be? Reigning Foresee's image would definitely fall. Reflection of Years understood this, but there was nothing he could do. Just as Unsworn Sword said this, Countercurrent immediately said, "Guild leader Unsworn, you have good leadership. Reigning Foresees is the #1 guild in our Cloud City. Isn't it a piece of cake for you to deal with a small fry like the system?" Some of the more honest guild leaders shook their heads at Countercurrent's words. If it was a piece of cake, they wouldn't have been beaten so badly just now. And some of the less virtuous ones could also tell that going against the current was to put the sword of no oath on the bonfire to be roasted. So they all gloated and waited to watch the show. Sword of Unsworn gritted his teeth and went all out. If he still insisted on putting up a front at a time like this, wouldn't he just be asking for trouble? He immediately said, "We're all smart people. We have 170,000 brothers, and we're all gamers. Who has commanded such a large army before? If you really want me to make a decision, then I have no idea. Let's discuss it together." In a sense, Unsworn Sword's words could also be understood as him admitting that he was not competent enough to be the commander-in-chief. Of course, he wouldn't say this out loud. What he was looking forward to was getting everyone's understanding. Then they would really come up with ideas together. Then they would assign manpower, coordinate, and so on. He was still the chief commander. Unsworn Sword was dreaming, but how could others give him such a huge advantage? Against the Current smiled and said, "Guild leader Lifeless is too humble, too polite. If you continue to be so polite, then I'll do it." "Then you do it," Unsworn Sword said. Since Against the Current was still mocking him, he countered. Against the Current nodded and said, "Then I'll do it." Unsworn Sword was dumbfounded. Why did Against the Current really dare to take this hot potato? It seemed like he already had a plan in mind, but he still pushed the position of commander-in-chief to Unsworn Sword. Now, it seemed like he had no choice but to take it back. He was basically trying to embarrass Unsworn Sword. "I gave you a chance, but you can't do it, so I'll do it." Against the Current not only gained a good reputation, but also the position of commander-in-chief, killing two birds with one stone. Unsworn Sword looked at Reflection of Time blankly. Reflection of Time sent him a private message. Does this guy have an idea? Unsworn Sword suddenly reacted. Damn, don't tell me this guy has grasped some key mission? Time's Reflection also realized what was going on. They firmly believed that none of the players had the talent to command 170,000 people. Against the Current's confidence in taking on this task could only mean that he had grasped some key mission that could decide the outcome of this city. From the simple actions and oaths of the NPCs before the battle, this city battle itself was like a large-scale group mission. So it wasn't impossible for there to be a small plot hidden within it. What about our people? Did the people we sent out find any clues? Unsworn Sword hurriedly asked. No, everyone is looking for NPCs at the resurrection point and the camp. Most of the quests they received were logistics, food, and the like. I can't see any key missions, Reflection of Time said. Against the Current, they started in the direction of the West Gate. Send a few people over there to scout, Unsworn Sword said. I'll personally lead some people, Reflection of Time said. All right. Unsworn Sword nodded. Reflection of Time quietly left from behind Unsworn Sword. He wasn't the guild leader, so no one paid attention to his actions. At this time, Against the Current had become the new leader of the guild leader circle, and he was gathering everyone to listen to his speech. Everyone, since we're going to cooperate, a unified command is necessary, but we're not the same guild. And the game doesn't have a world channel, so I suggest that we form a party first. We can then use the party channel to communicate with each other. And then each guild leader can use their own guild channel to give orders to their brothers. What do you think? When everyone heard this, they all praised Against the Current's brilliant idea, coming up with such a reliable plan as soon as he became the guild leader. Many people also looked at Unsworn Sword with disdain. Unsworn Sword's face was full of tears. What kind of brilliant idea was this? They had used this method during the expedition to Sunset City. At that time, they had gathered the mercenary leaders into one team and managed them. There were mercenary leaders present who had participated in that incident, but obviously, there was no reason for them to suddenly come out and say, "This method has been used before." Sword of Oaths only felt wronged. I think we need to understand our opponents more deeply. Just now, our Westgate side lost too quickly, so we didn't have any information on the system. How about your side? Against the Current asked. Same. The Northgate players all said. They didn't dare to move at first because of the giant rock, so it was better not to talk about it. Actually, even if they didn't talk about it, Westgate's people knew about it. Against the Current said. That's why. I think we need to organize some probing attacks and get a better grasp of the system's subordinates, attack methods, and so on. Yes, that makes sense. Everyone nodded. Unsworn Sword felt even more wronged. What kind of bullshit plan is this? How are you going to command these 170,000 people? Even now, Against the Current still hasn't said anything. Against the Current continued to speak step by step. Leave the task of testing the waters to us. Everyone, take a short break. All the guild leaders felt even more touched. What probing? This was actually just going up to die and testing the system's reaction. Although everyone knew that there was no punishment for dying, which was why Against the Current was so generous. But no matter what, they were going to die, so what else could they say? Unsworn Sword didn't want to let Against the Current take the lead, so he jumped out and said, "We can't just sit around, let's go as well." That's good. Against the Current smiled. He understood what Unsworn Sword was thinking, but he didn't say anything. The other 3 guilds were level 6 guilds, but in terms of the quality of their members, they really couldn't compete with these 2 guilds. So when these 2 guilds were bickering with each other, they didn't say anything. Guild leader Unsworn, should we work together and charge? Against the Current said to Unsworn Sword with a smile. Unsworn Sword curled his lips and looked like he didn't want to work with Against the Current. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Fengxing was in an awkward situation. Time had already left just now, and now he was the only one beside Sword Without Oath. Yet, Sword Without Oath still had to act like he was calling out to his friends, causing Fengxing, who was the only one who was maintaining his imposing manner, to feel very sad. Against the Current called out to the guild leaders from behind. Then let us and Reigning 4Cs test out the system's attack. Everyone stay here and keep an eye out. Yes. All the guild leaders nodded. The 2 guild leaders left and gathered their people. Against the Current sent a message to Unsworn Sword. Guild leader Unsworn. How do we fight? Unsworn Sword thought for a moment and said, "Let's take turns and use the tactics we're good at. We'll use archers as our main force, and you guys use mages as your main force. Let's see if the system treats us differently." Yes, it's decided. You guys go first? Okay. Unsworn Sword thought of taking turns. Testing the system was only one of the ideas, and the other was to compete with Against the Current. Against the Current's archery, Unsworn Sword's main force was sharpshooters. Their mobility was much better than Singing for Wine's mages. Even if they lost in the end, they would have a much easier time than singing for wine. This was not something that could be said openly, but after returning to their own guild and gathering their sharpshooters, Unsworn Sword gave them a good speech. After all, this wasn't a personal grudge between Unsworn Sword and singing against wine. Enmity was part of Overlord's guild culture. When everyone heard that they were going to compete with singing against wine, their morale soared. Nodding in satisfaction, Unsworn Sword dispatched another batch of clerics and archers to form a two-tier team to provide support from the rear. Everyone, keep your distance. Be careful of the catapult's boulders. Once you're within attack range, stop advancing and attack. Unsworn Sword set the strategy. Move out. Unsworn Sword waved his sword and led the party. Although he was not an archer, as the guild leader, it was not appropriate for him to watch from the back. He was currently in the middle of the cleric party, shouting to boost everyone's morale. The guild leaders of the various guilds had already communicated their intentions to the guild members. Everyone knew that Against the Current was going to test the waters with their attacks. On days when there were no major events, it was rare to see Against the Current's complete archery formation. At this moment, it had attracted a large number of players to observe. The players used their appraisal skills to admire the equipment of the sharpshooters from reigning the four seas. As expected of a big guild, look at their equipment. Most of the small and medium-sized guilds let out envious cries. As for the players who were not even level 41, they did not even have the chance to be envious. They could not even appraise the equipment. Careful, careful, watch your distance. Unsworn Sword warned in the guild channel. The first boulder that killed Black Rose was still on the ground. This boulder was also the furthest away from all the other boulders. Naturally, it was regarded as the furthest range of the catapults. Seeing that they were about to step into this area, Against the Current became cautious. Spread out a little more. Unsworn Sword said. The sharpshooters spread out in all directions. At this moment, there were only 100 of them attacking. There was more than enough space for everyone to throw 4 to 5 boulders at the same time. It's coming. Suddenly someone shouted. As expected, the sound of a mechanism on top of the wall rang out. Boulders flew from the top of the wall, arcing through the air towards Against the Current's players. Reigning the Four Seas was prepared for this, and they had plenty of room to dodge. This time, they were completely different from the catapults that had smashed them into a mess. More than 100 sharpshooters aimed at where the stones were coming from, and they dodged left, right, front, and back. Surprisingly, not a single one of them was hit. Alright, that's it. Let's continue forward. Unsworn Sword shouted. The sharpshooters responded with a roar. The attack speed of the catapults was not high, and the boulders were large targets. Under such circumstances, it was not difficult to dodge. Everyone realized that this kind of attack was very powerful against a densely packed army, but it seemed a little out of place against the current attack, which was like a group of scattered soldiers. Forward, forward, forward. Be careful. We're about to enter the archer's attack range. Everyone be careful. Prepare to attack. Unsworn Sword excitedly commanded his men to advance. Even a short-legged warrior like him could easily dodge the boulders. This made him very excited. The catapults had the longest range, followed by the archers on top of the wall, and then the mages. The range of the system's archers was the same as that of the players. Unsworn Sword was prepared to use his own archer formation to fight the system's wall soldiers. The catapults were no longer a threat to them. However, at this moment, the sound of another wave of catapults rang out. Some of the more attentive players noticed that the sound of the stones flying through the air was slightly different this time. The sharpshooters of Against the Current raised their eyes and prepared to dodge the incoming boulders. Suddenly, their eyes widened in shock. This time, it was not the boulders that were larger than humans, but countless boulders the size of heads. The smaller the boulders did not mean that they could fly faster, but the number of boulders had increased. The catapults had loaded an uncountable number of such large boulders onto them, creating a storm. It was not that the players did not want to dodge, but the falling boulders were too dense. Whether they could dodge them or not depended on luck, not skill. Under such attacks, the sharpshooters were killed one after another. Unsworn Sword was burning with anxiety, but at this time, an assassin also appeared beside him in stealth. Unsworn Sword, of course, had rich experience in close combat. After this exchange, he knew that the strength of the assassins was quite strong. Few players would be a match for them in a one-on-one fight. Unsworn Sword barely managed to kill the assassin who attacked him, but he relied on several priests to take care of him, the guildmaster. The other sharpshooters did not have such good luck. They were killed one after another. Some of them wanted to retreat, but after a few steps, they were attacked by the stones of the catapults. Unsworn Sword let out a long sigh. He knew that this was the end of their test. Butterfly Knot. Saturday's update, Chapter 666, is so smooth. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.